Hey guys, welcome everyone to Twilight. We hope you enjoy our videos. If there's anything in the video that you don't like or if you have any concerns, please let us know in the comment section. Let's keep the conversation going, but for now, let's head towards the video. What if Bella confronted Laurent in New Moon and changed her fate? My heart beat a frantic rhythm as I scrambled through the underbrush in what I hoped was the direction of the road. Perhaps I should have been more afraid of the 4 giant wolves that had joined us in the clearing, but I could make myself worry about them in light of this new information. She thought it more appropriate to kill you than Edward Fair turnabout, mate for a mate. They were here. And Victoria wanted revenge. Tears blurred my vision, but I made myself keep going. Whatever temporary distance the wolves had gifted me wouldn't last long. I wasn't a graceful person at the best of times, but my panic made it worse. Several times, stray roots and rocks left me sprawling in the dirt. And every time it happened, I waited for a weight on my back and the snarl that would signal the end of my life. But somehow it never came. I wasn't an idiot. Even if, somehow, the wolves had managed to keep Laurent occupied long enough for me to get away, I was by no means safe. If not now, then soon. Laurent had made that perfectly clear. The end that the Cullens had been trying so hard to prevent before they left was finally here. And in some way, I wasn't upset about it. As far as I was concerned, my life had ended back in September. It was time for my body to catch up. I would gladly give myself over to death, but there were complications. Charlie. Jacob. Victoria's search for me would bring her into town if she wasn't already.
It's true that I didn't go much of anywhere but home, school, and La Push these days, but when she inevitably found my scent, it would lead her to one of those 3 places. While I wasn't exactly against death for myself, I couldn't bear to think of what would happen to either Charlie or Jacob if she came looking for me.
Finally I made it to my truck. Wrenching the door open, I twisted the key in the ignition and started driving the truck as fast as it could go back towards town. Charlie would be at work for a while still. That was a small mercy at least. The last time I left, I had the Cullens helping me. I could make it back to apologize. I didn't have that luxury this time. When I left, Charlie would never see me again. I couldn't face him this time. I tried to focus on the road, but my thoughts were a million miles away. I would need to leave Charlie a note that was plausible enough not to raise suspicion but would discourage him from trying to find me. I definitely didn't want him coming out to find me at the same time Victoria did. I snorted. Fat chance of being able to accomplish it. I would just have to keep running away from Charlie while Victoria found me. I mentally calculated my meager savings from working at Newton's. It wouldn't last long, but it shouldn't need to. Victoria would still catch me before it ran out. How long did I have? I forced myself to slow down as I entered the town of Forks. If Charlie had to pull me over, it would ruin absolutely everything. There had to be another way, I mused as I pulled into the driveway. Something that would hold Charlie off from following me for a while, so I could move slower and give Victoria a chance to catch me. The answer came to me as I dragged my duffel bag out from under my bed in an eerie echo of the previous spring. Billy. He knew. I could give him the story. A watered-down version anyway. He wouldn't be able to do anything to help me, but he could know enough to understand why I couldn't have Charlie following me. He could convince Charlie to give me a few days of space. His camaraderie with Charlie would ensure his desire to see him safe. Hopefully that would be enough. I shoved clothes in the bag without really looking at them. The loose plan was to head south. Being somewhere sunny would slow Victoria down even more. And my heart clenched at the thought it would effectively ensure the Cullens would be nowhere near when she found me. Thinking of the Cullens gave me pause. Would they help if I asked them to? I snorted. Sure they would. Carlyle devoted his life to helping humanity. If I told them what was going on, of course they would try to keep me safe. Did I want that though? Did I actually want to stay alive after all this, especially if it meant being around Edward when he didn't want me around anymore? I wasn't sure, but it was a moot point anyway. I had no way of reaching them. All their cell numbers had been changed. All the emails I sent Alice had been returned. In the frantic 48 hours before the dark hole in my chest had utterly consumed me, I had made sure of it. They had given me no way to reach out to them. My packing finished, I glanced at the clock on my bedside table. I had another hour until Charlie would be home, but by then I had to be long gone. Now was the part I was dreading. With a shaking hand, I ripped 2 pieces of binder paper out of my notebook and found a pen. The writing was hardly legible and tear stains dampened portions of the paper, but in 3 minutes, I had the note that would destroy Charlie's world and at the same time secure his life. Charlie. I want you to know that this isn't your fault. You did the best you could and you were right. Being in Forks is too much. The memories are too much. I have to get away. I need some space. Please don't try to find me. I'll call you when I'm ready. Love you always. Bella. Simple was probably better, I mused as I folded the paper and placed it on the kitchen table. No details. Definitely something a heartbroken teenager eager to find herself would write. The next letter would be more difficult. Billy's letter took almost 20 minutes. I restarted it 4 times.
It wasn't perfect, but at the end, I had a paper that gave him the real reason I was running, while making sure he knew that it was his job to keep Charlie in Forks and take care of him now.
As an afterthought, I made Billy a promise. I would phone his house every 3 days so he knew I was still alive. I was slightly morbid, I knew, but I couldn't bear the thought of being just a statistic. A missing person Charlie was forced to spend his entire life trying to find. He would need some closure when it finally happened, and this was the best I could offer him. The letter still didn't feel complete, and it took only another minute to understand why. I couldn't leave without saying goodbye to Jake. He may not believe in what was happening, but the truth was he was the only reason I had healed enough to consider fighting back for just long enough to keep Victoria away from the people I loved. Grabbing a new sheet of paper, I scribbled a few sentences on it and tucked it inside Billy's letter. It wasn't much. A note could hardly portray just how much I owed my personal son, but it had to be enough. I labeled and stamped an envelope and grabbed my duffel bag. It was time. Don't be ridiculous, whispered Edward's voice in the back of my mind. You can't escape her doing this. Silly Edward. That's not the point. He of all people should know that there was no use in avoiding the inevitable. I paused briefly outside the mailbox to deposit the letters to Billy and Jake. I held it over the mailbox for a brief second. Suddenly I wasn't sure if I truly wanted to do this. But a flash of red out of the corner of my eye made my decision for me. I had no way of knowing if it was actually Victoria, but still my time was up. My heart hammering, I got back in my truck and pulled away from the curb. In the back of my mind, I had hoped to make one final stop at the Cullens' house, but there wouldn't be enough time. Even if I hadn't bothered to write him a note, and he had removed himself from my life. There was no one to come back for a note even if I did leave one. All I could do was content myself with a brief glance at the turnoff towards the Cullens' house as I sped past. Goodbye, Edward. Goodbye, Alice. You'll see you in the next life. With one last gut-wrenching effort, I ripped my eyes away from the rearview mirror and looked forward towards the gathering darkness as I drove away from the town I once called home. Bella had called since before we chased that leech away from her in the clearing. In some ways it was easier. My resolve to keep away from her bled out just a little bit every time I was forced to ignore her call. But lying to her would be even worse. It's better this way, I tried to convince myself as I ran through the forest. If anyone deserves a life free from the supernatural, it's her. I can give her that. Jeez, Jake, are you sure you didn't imprint on her? Jared's grumbling thoughts finally got my attention. I growled. It wasn't his fault, of course. I was still getting used to the constant, if unintentional, invasion of privacy and the embarrassment that came with it. But Jared had just as much access to Sam's mind as he did mine. Despite thinking of Bella every minute of every day, it wasn't the same. As much as I had begged for it to happen, I hadn't imprinted on Bella Swan. And the pack's rules were absolute. Only imprintees could know about us for their own protection. And that meant that however much I needed her to know, I couldn't tell her. So I did the only thing I could do and continued to ignore her calls. Hey, at least Billy is in the loop, thought Jared wryly. I winced. It was true, there were definitely some perks to having an elder for a father. Jared wasn't so lucky. The council had vouched for him and got his parents off his back a bit, but no amount of volunteer work could explain 11 pairs of shredded pants. Still, being the son of an elder meant that normal dad the night I turned into a giant wolf in the middle of the kitchen, and all of dad's weird watchful glances over the previous month suddenly made way too much sense. There was no more school and no more family dinners to keep up appearances. And no more Bella. Oh, give it a rest, grumbled Paul. No one wants to listen to you brooding over the leech lover. That wasn't Nice Ball, both Embry and Jared chorused. Our turn for patrol though, Jake. You should take a break. That was Embry's kind way of saying that he was also tired of my moaning. Always the peacemaker of the bunch, there was a reason he was often paired with Paul. Without a word I phased back next to the hollow tree where I hid my clothes. Many of the pack chose to wear their clothes tied to a leg, but I liked to leave them behind if I could. Carrying the clothes with me made running, the only decent part of this whole wolf business, more awkward and not nearly as fun. I yawned. My patrol had lasted until the early hours of the morning and I was beat. Ever since we caught up to the dark-haired leech in the meadow and caught the scent of a second, Sam had been running us double time. I frowned as I swung myself into my bedroom window.
According to the legends, leeches were supposed to come, feed, and leave again quickly, the Cullens being the exceptions.
To have vampires sticking around for weeks like these ones had was a little weird. Sam was right to be on edge. But now that the black-haired one was dead and the second one had given us a fresh trail since the day before last, Jared figured that meant they had finally taken a hint, moved on. If only my life worked out that easily. I could hear voices coming from the living room. Dad and Sam were muttering quietly. Sam often stopped by to talk to him about tribe business, and usually they tried to rope me in. I put extra effort into moving around my room quietly. Today I just wanted them to leave me alone so I could sleep. Unfortunately, my nearly silent pass around my round ended when I knocked my alarm clock off the bedside table. Ever since my insane growth spurt in the last month, I still haven't quite figured out what to do with the extra length on my limbs. I must be a bad influence on you, Bella would have laughed. Instead, all I heard was Dad's voice calling from the living room. Hey Jake, did you come on in here for a minute? I have something to talk to you about. My refusal caught in my throat as I registered my father's uncharacteristically anxious voice. Sam stood up and nodded as I entered. I'll round up the guys. We'll all be in the usual spot when you're done. I felt a chill slide down my spine. Sam wouldn't recall a patrol for no reason. Whatever had my dad on edge was big. Dad, what's going on? I whispered. He grimaced and passed me a sheet of notebook paper covered with an untidy scrawl. My thrill at seeing Bella's writing was quickly doused when I began reading. Dear Billy. By now, Charlie will have probably told you that I decided to leave for a bit. I can't tell him what's actually going on, but you deserve more details. There's a vampire after me. I don't want to tell you how I know this because I don't want to put anyone else in danger, but it's exactly as serious a situation as it sounds. I'm leaving now, so after today, I'm hoping you guys won't be in danger anymore, but still be careful. I'm pretty sure they'll follow me away from here though. Look Billy, you and I both know I'm probably not making it out of this alive. I have almost no shot of outrunning a vampire by myself. It's better this way though. I'll lead her out, then Charlie and Jake will be safe. It probably would have been better if Daho just left without a word, but I couldn't do that to Charlie. He wouldn't rest until he spent the rest of his life trying to find me. I'm sorry for leaving you this mess. As of when I left, I know you and Charlie weren't speaking because of Jake, but he's going to need his best friend now. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye on some things, but if you've ever cared about me and Charlie, please help him let me go. He's going to need someone to remind him how to live again, like Jake did for me. Thanks, Bella. P.S. I'm going to call every 3 days. It will always be from a different phone in case Charlie gets any bright ideas about trying to track me down, but as long as I'm alive you'll hear from me. And once I stop calling, you'll know it's over and you can help Charlie find peace. I couldn't breathe. It was worse than the time Paul accidentally knocked me off a little cliff. The room shimmered dangerously around me and I instinctively took a calming breath. When I looked up, Dad was looking at me with something like pity. I stood up to leave and he shook his head. I'm sorry Jake, there's more. I raised my eyebrow at him and he held out a folded piece of paper with my name on the front. Jake. It was like I was standing at the edges of the room. I watched myself take the piece of paper and unfold it. The words swam in my vision, but I forced myself to focus my eyes just long enough to read them. Dear Jake. I am so sorry about all of this. I wish I could tell you what was going on, but I can't. All I can say is that this is really for the better. I know you've been the one ignoring me and I wish I knew what was going on, but that's over now. You'll never see me again. I love you and I wish you all the best life has to offer. Be safe, Bella. With a rush I was shoved back into my body and suddenly I was outside and running. The pack's voices filled my head but I pushed them out. I had to get to her house. I had to find a trail. She couldn't be gone. Jake. Stop running and meet us in the clearing. We need to talk about this. Sam's voice broke through the frenzy and despite my every instinct telling me to keep going, I felt my steps slow. Damn alpha command. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't ignore it. My brothers were waiting for me in the clearing where I brought Bella to ride our motorbikes. Back when we were just a human boy and girl looking for a good time. It felt like a lifetime ago. The rest of the pack were all standing around in their human forms. It will be better if we're not phased, Sam said softly. We often did this when there was a sensitive topic to discuss. It usually helped not being able to hear everyone's inner monologue. Today I doubted it would make much difference, but I phased back anyway. Does everyone already know what was in the letter? I demanded. Just Billy's. We didn't look at the one she left for you. Sam's voice was calm but there was an edge in his eyes. Then you already know I have to go after her. Of course, as soon as the leech lover's in trouble you'll just ditch your brothers to go after her. Paul snapped. My quiet snarl was almost drowned out by Sam's reply. You know that's not practical, Jacob. Then what would you have me do? I asked, panic bleeding into my voice as I finally put my horror in words. Bella's alone, being chased by a vampire. She knows what she's up against and she's smart, but it's not enough. You can't just ask me to leave her to deal with this herself. If only she'd asked for help, Jared groaned. We could have protected her here. Why would she have? I snapped. Even if she did know she had help here, which thanks to Sam she didn't, this is Bella we're talking about. She's so self-sacrificing that she wouldn't have wanted to put us in danger anyway. Paul snorted. So she's stupid too. That tracks. Shut up, Paul, barked Sam. If you can't keep your opinions to yourself, I'll have you running laps around the reservation. I just don't know what we're doing here. Paul said. She made her choice and left. It sucks, but we have our own borders to protect. Look, Jake, Sam said, catching the horror on my face. We need you here, but I get that you can't do nothing. Maybe next time she calls Billy, you can convince her to come back so we can help her. But, Jake, you won't go looking for her, Sam rumbled. I felt my knees buckle a bit under the weight of the alpha command and I ducked my head. Sam nodded and looked away from me. When is she supposed to call? Embry asked. The letter was written 2 days ago, so probably tomorrow. Jake, you can stay close to the house so you don't miss it. And what do we do if she doesn't call? Embry asked. No one wanted to answer. I had only been gone for just over a month, but Esm had been busy. When I left Ithaca to travel down south, the house had been a dilapidated structure that had been long abandoned to the elements. Now the house positively shone.
The new windows, while not as large as the ones in Forks, still replaced much of the former front of the house and the siding was freshly painted.
There was also a brand new porch and on it waited Jasper.
He got to his feet with a wistful smile on his face, and when I stepped out of the car, he was at my side in an instant.
Alice, he whispered reverently and bent down to kiss me. The piece of my heart that had gone missing the last time I left was there again, and I exulted in the newfound completeness. And from the movement of Jasper's lips against mine, he was feeling the same. I was done missing him. I was home to stay. Thank you for being here for me, Jazz, I said softly.
I know he had wanted to come with me, especially given how far south my search had taken me, but I was grateful he agreed to stay behind.
This search was something I had needed to do by myself. I knew you'd be back, darling. It was just your turn to keep me waiting. We both chuckled. Besides, he continued, Esm needed at least one of her kids at home. His rough thumb smoothed out the crease that had appeared in my forehead. I was desperate to ask him what he meant by that, but we could both hear Esm puttering inside the house. Speaking of which, Jasper said in a louder voice, Esm has been giving us some space, but she's been missing you too. As if on cue, Esm appeared in the doorway and I ran into her arms. Her eyes were anxious, but she smiled warmly and squeezed me tightly. I've missed you so much, dear, she said, pulling away and winding her arms through mine. Come in and tell me everything. So I did. As the three of us settled on the couch in the living room, I told them about my search for all the asylums that were active during the period of time I thought I had been changed. How I narrowed them down by visiting the sites of each one, looking for something that was familiar. How I finally found the spot where I had awoken as a newborn and a photograph of me as a young girl in a box of records nearby. I shared with them how the gravestone in the local cemetery listed my death as the same date as the admission paperwork. And finally, I told them the most important piece. My name was Mary Alice Brandon. And I have a niece. She still lives in Biloxi. Esm's arms tightened around me. I knew she had tried to keep track of her own nephews, but decades of moving around the country had made that nearly impossible. Did you speak to her? I tried, but she's pretty old and has dementia, I think. She didn't have much she could tell me. Do you know if she has any other family? I don't know, I said after a brief pause. Although I also didn't try too hard to find them. I flashed a grin at the woman I considered my mother. I guess once I started thinking about family, I started missing my own family too much. Esm's smile was enough to melt the hardest of hearts. Well, my turn to share some good news now. Rose and Emmett are coming back. She clapped her hands happily and I squealed. Really, it's been months? She nodded happily. I didn't tell her that Daho seen their decision to return the day before. Even though I often ruined my siblings' surprises for my own amusement, I rarely did it to Esm. She experienced such joy from good news like this that it seemed like a crime to take it away from her. It will still be a few days, but I can't wait, she confessed. To have 4 children under my roof again. It's been far too quiet around here. She sighed softly. I'll come around. Jasper said, guessing where Esm's thoughts had turned. He won't stay away forever. Esme shot him a grateful smile. He's already lasted longer than I thought he would, she sighed. But he's not the only one I'm talking about. She twisted around to look at the gallery wall behind us. I glanced over at the impressive wall of pictures that Esme included some version of in every house we lived in. There were pictures from all the couples' weddings, pictures of each of us doing what we loved best. Edward playing the piano. Rosalie standing beside a car she had just finished. Emmett and Jasper playing chess, Carlisle at a hospital, Esme in her garden. Dozens of memories of our long lives. And finally, near the bottom right corner, a picture of Edward and myself on the front steps of our Forks house with Bella sandwiched between us. A lump rose in my throat. All three of us looked so happy in that picture. It had been one of the hottest days of the summer, and Bella was tucked as close to Edward and me as she could be with a bright orange popsicle held in her hand. She was laughing at something I had said, while Edward gazed at her fondly. None of us had any idea that just a few weeks later we would be ripped apart from each other. The picture is what Rosalie and I thought about right before she and Emmett left, Esme said softly. She thought that since Edward wanted us out of her life, we should keep her out of ours. The picture wasn't why Rosalie left though. Ever since we left, Rosalie wanted to pretend that our time in Forks was just a bad dream that we got to wake up from. So she planned another wedding around Christmas and got upset when no one else was as joyously happy as she wanted them to be. I suspected this was also the reason for their extended honeymoon in Europe. I know Rosalie wants to put Bella out of our lives completely, but no one else wants it. We'll stay away from her like Edward asked, but we don't have to pretend like she's not our family. I said. A frown tugged at Esme's face. But family doesn't just leave, she said sadly. Like every other time she made that point, I had no response. The night Edward decided it was time for us to move on, she and I had yelled at him for hours.
Surprisingly, Emmett had been on our side at the beginning, but by the time that horrible night had ended, he, Rosalie, Jasper, and Carlisle all voted to leave Bella the way Edward wanted us to.
To make matters even worse, Edward had returned from speaking to her to tell us that she was so angry she didn't want to see us again. That she didn't even want to say goodbye. She had every right to be mad, I knew that, but it still hurt. Alice, maybe you could just this once, Esme started painfully. I wanted to. Oh, how badly I wanted to. And sometimes the visions came without me asking for them. But at this point, I knew that looking for her would be more painful all around. I shook my head and Esme sighed. I'm sorry, Alice, I shouldn't have asked. It's fine, I twisted my face into a grin. I still sometimes see things accidentally anyways. Apparently Bella decided to buy a van a few days ago. A van, Jasper snorted. Why? I don't know. You know my visions don't give me that information. I chuckled. But it was really hideous. Rosalie would be mortified just to park next to it. That's good, Esme said suddenly. That Bella somehow managed to acquire an even uglier vehicle, Jasper questioned, raising an eyebrow. I giggled. No, more that she's doing things. Making plans. It's better than before. I winced. I knew what she had been talking about. The very first accidental vision the week after we left was one of the most heartbreaking things I had ever seen. Not thinking, I shared it with Esme and she had been absolutely frantic with worry. It took Jasper and Carlisle several hours to talk her out of driving to Forks immediately. After coming out of her room the next morning, we didn't speak about it again, but the picture of Bella, Edward, and I appeared on the wall later that day. So where is Carlisle anyway, I asked, trying to break off the train of thought. Jasper raised an eyebrow and I smiled at him. I know he's at the hospital right now, I amended.
What I meant was, why is he there? I thought he was working nights.
Oh, you know Carlisle, Esme said with forced lightness. The hospital finds itself short-staffed and he's asked to stay if he doesn't need to be at the university. I glanced at Jasper and he gave me the tiniest shake of his head. That wasn't all to it then. Jasper, I could use a hunt. I said, suddenly desperate to get to a place where we could talk freely. Will you come with me? Always, he said, taking my hand. You'll be all right, Mom. I raised my eyebrow. As much as Jasper loved Esme as a mother figure, usually he left it to Edward and I to call her Mom whenever we were feeling particularly sentimental. Esme smiled in return and kissed him on the cheek. Of course. Have fun. She called as we sailed out of the house together. Jasper and I ran for nearly 10 minutes before we slowed down to a walk. I kept my hand in his as I wandered towards the glint of water I sighted through the trees. The melting snow made the river move quickly over the rocks and I pictured how beautiful the spot would be once the wildflowers came out. I resolved to come back in a few minutes to see if I was right. There was something about my homecoming that didn't feel right. I didn't doubt for a moment that Jasper and Esme were happy to see me, and I was sure Carlisle would be as well when he returned from the hospital. I also hadn't come expecting them to be fully recovered from the losses we had suffered over the last few months. But still, when I arrived, there was an emptiness in the air that was more than just a lack of a few people.
How bad is it, Jazz? He didn't answer right away, and when I turned to look at him, there was a crease between his eyebrows.
I rubbed my finger over it, watching it smooth away as he glanced at me. Pretty bad, he finally admitted. Carlisle has been working longer and longer hours, and whenever he's home, he's listless. It feels too empty in this house and he can't stand it. That I could understand. The absence of Rosalie, Emmett, Edward, and Bella must be weighing heavily on him.
I think he's still not sure if he made the correct decision letting Edward drag us all out of Forks, Jasper added.
Of course he didn't, I muttered. What about Esme? Jasper sighed. She's hurting. She misses everyone and is doing her best to make this house a home like the previous ones, but her heart isn't in it this time. She keeps up with the gardens and she wipes up the dust, and I try to distract her when I can, but most of the time she's just staring out the window. And with Carlisle distancing himself now, he trailed off. I'm glad I stayed behind.
I can't tell you how much I wanted to come with you, but I see now that Esme needed me here.
I nodded slowly. Listening to Jasper describe what had happened in the last month, I suddenly realized what the emptiness was. Esme always kept the house fairly tidy, but there were always hints. Little proofs of life scattered through the house. Carlisle was in the habit of leaving the books he was reading sitting on the coffee tables. Jasper and Emmett almost always had video game controllers sitting out. In Forks, there was almost always a blanket draped across the back of the couch so Bella could reach it easily. In this house, there was nothing. It was a perfectly staged house that showed no signs of actually being lived in. Is Esme afraid to move on without her? I asked softly. I don't think afraid is the right word. But she feels so guilty. She described it once as feeling like she was betraying one child for another, only to end up with neither of them. Jasper squeezed my hand. Hopefully now that you're home, there will be a little bit more to keep her mind off things. And Rosalie and Emmett are coming too. I reminded him. Soon there would be video game controllers lying around, and Jasper and I would work on getting Carlisle home more often. The piano would remain closed and the blankets would stay tucked away, but the rest of the pieces of our family would come out from hiding. For the first time since the disaster in September, I let myself hope that everything would be okay. The call came 12 hours early and I missed it by 15 minutes. I had just run out to pick up Billy from Charlie's, where the two had brokered an awkward peace, but by the time I arrived back at the house, the red light on the answering machine was flashing. Now it was early in the morning and I knew I had patrol soon. I really should have been sleeping, but I just couldn't. It felt like the very definition of wrong to be lying down getting rest while Bella probably couldn't. Abruptly I stalked back to the answering machine and pressed the play button again. Hey Billy, it's Bella. Just wanted to call and let you know that I'm alright. Talk to you soon, bye. Belatedly, I wondered if I should have cleared her message off the answering machine, but I quickly decided against it. It was morbid, but I wanted her last words to us saved. Her voice was thin and exhausted and she tumbled over her words like she was racing against the clock. But it was there, and listening to the message over and over again, I couldn't hear any traces of pain or terror. And even if she had been afraid, who could have blamed her? Most humans would have given into it the minute they found out they were being chased by a bloodthirsty monster. She was honestly sounding better than I could have hoped for. As much as I couldn't help myself from listening to the message she left, it wasn't right. Bella was only barely there. I paced over to the TV cabinet and pulled out the video camera. Thumbing through the saved files, I found one from the date I was looking for and pressed play. We're here, recording the exact moment the great Jacob Black starts his Volkswagen Rabbit for the first time. Bella giggled from behind the camera. This was better. Her voice was still soft, but it didn't sound nearly so frail. It sounded like the Bella I had fallen madly in love with. The camera was trained on the rabbit in the garage, and as I watched, Quill poked his head over the roof. I felt a pang of bitterness. I missed Quill too, but not in the way I missed Bella. For all Quill's anger with the situation, he was safe at home, just missing his friends. Besides, it wouldn't be long now until he joined us. What about me? The Quill in the video asked hotly. Bella giggled again. Fine, the great Jacob Black and his sidekick, Quill. Find your own car to rebuild, dummy. Video Jake lowered the hood and beamed at the camera. The video had only been taken 4 weeks ago, but it could very well have been a lifetime ago for all I recognized myself in the bow. His hair was long and dyed an messy knot at the back of his head, and his face still had the slightly rounded quality of a boy turning into a man. But the thing that shocked me most was his eyes. After I first phased, it took me a full week to work up the nerve to look at myself in the mirror. I was expecting the short hair and I could already feel my face firming up. What I wasn't expecting was how old my eyes looked. The boy in the video had carefree eyes that shone with love for the girl holding the video camera. By contrast, the man in the mirror had eyes that were drawn and shuttered off. The eyes of someone who had lived too long and knew too much. Would Bella even like my eyes now? I grimaced and tried to shake the thought out of my head. It was the last thing I should be worrying about right now. I turned the camera off. I knew what would happen next anyway. Daho go to start the car and nothing would happen. Daho whacked my forehead on the steering wheel a little too hard, then Quill would bust out laughing and Bella would stop recording. I found out later that it was Quill's idea of a hilarious joke to disconnect part of the engine so that Daho embarrassed myself in front of Bella. Let's just say he had a surprise guest in his bedroom that night. I had already watched this video a dozen times since I phased, basking in the sound of Bella's laughter. Her laughs didn't come easy, especially after her bloodsucker boyfriend ditched her, but when she did laugh it was the most beautiful sound in the world. I clenched my fists against the white-hot rage that rushed down my spine. Daho already hated the Cullens after they abandoned her, but after learning that they were immortal beings with the time and resources to do literally anything they wanted, well, let's just say it was a good thing no one was standing right next to me when I learned a particular bit of info. Even now it was a struggle to hold myself together. Once I had myself under control, I picked up Bella's letter to Billy again. There was no point. Daho already basically memorized it, but still I looked. It was written hastily, with just enough information to stir up a panic but not enough that was actually useful. I groaned. Bella going missing was definitely something I couldn't deal with right now. Especially with the red-headed leech still messing around. Suddenly something the black-haired one said to Bella before they knew we were there echoed in my mind. She wanted to kill you herself. She's sort of put out with you, Bella. Shit. Could the black-haired leech have been talking about the redhead? I hadn't had a chance to think about it before now, but it explained why the redhead was still hanging around. And if Bella had picked up on the same phrasing I had, it would explain why Bella had left so quickly. She was after Bella. Jake, you okay? I suddenly became aware of the wood of the table groaning beneath my fingertips. Embry's giant body finished his entrance into the house and he peered at my face. You look a little sick, man. Bella, I groaned, unable to get anything more out. His face twisted in sympathy. Oh yeah, this sucks, man. But she just called yesterday. I don't think you need to worry yet. No, that's not it, I choked out. I think Bella's the one the redhead is after. That's why she won't F off. Embry's eyes were so wide I thought his eyeballs were going to fall out of their sockets, but after a minute he regained himself. But that's good, isn't it? I opened my mouth, probably to cuss him out, and he corrected himself in a rush. Not good, I mean definitely bad. But the last time we caught the leech's trail was yesterday, right? That means she hasn't figured out that Bella's left town yet. I groaned and dropped my head into my hands. Embry was right, but it didn't help a ton. We gotta talk to Sam about this, I muttered. Embry nodded. Everyone else should hear this too. I'll round up the pack, the shift should be changing soon anyways. You head to Emily's and meet us there. I nodded, exceptionally grateful to Embry for taking this on. I couldn't think of anything Daho rather do less than try to hide my inner thoughts from the guys right now. The walk to Emily's took longer than usual. Usually when I was forced to walk instead of run, whenever Sam got tired of my constant moaning about Bella, I was twitchy and impatient. Now, I relished the time alone with my thoughts. There was a sort of meditation with walking. It was easy to time my breathing to the beat of my feet on the ground. That, combined with lungfuls of dewy morning air, allowed calm to finally seep into my limbs. Running as a wolf was spectacular, but right now my body and my brain relished the break. Unfortunately, Emily didn't live too far away, and despite my slow pace, my legs carried me there long before my brain was ready for this conversation. When I let myself into the house, Embry and Jared were already scarfing down pancakes and bacon at the table. Emily looked up from the griddle where she was flipping pancakes and offered me a tentative smile. I could tell that she was still a little uncomfortable around me, so I gave her a small wave back, but didn't attempt to approach her. I probably shouldn't scare Sam's shy fiancé. She was sweet and she made really good muffins, and most importantly, she kept Sam in a good mood. Despite the hollow pit in my stomach, the pancakes were delicious, and I found myself halfway through the massive stack Emily passed me when Sam and Paul walked in. Sam ignored me and walked right back into the kitchen. With the expression of a starving man being presented with a feast, he kissed Emily's mouth tenderly. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Paul mimicking throwing up to Jared, who chucked a slice of bacon at him. Paul caught it and stuffed it in his mouth with a triumphant grin. I saw that, Paul, Sam said gruffly without turning around. Emily giggled and pulled herself out of his grasp to reach for a clean plate. Oh, lay off him, Sam. He's obviously starving after running for so long. In fact, shame on you for keeping him from his breakfast, she teased lightly. Yeah, shame. Paul called out and Sam rolled his eyes. Moving on. Jake, Embry said you thought you knew why the redhead is hanging around for so long. I quickly reminded them of what we overheard in the meadow and what was contained in Bella's letter to Billy. None of them had made the connection yet, but I could see it in their eyes when it happened. Only Embry stayed quiet in his seat, the picture of resignation. Jared leaned back and gave a long whistle. Okay, so let me get this straight. Your girlfriend knows the redhead is after her, but the redhead doesn't know she's left town yet, so this means we have a chance to get to her before she kills Bella. Oh. Jared rubbed the back of his head where Emily's wooden spoon had made contact. Sounds about right, I said dully. I didn't correct Jared's comment about our relationship status. It was common knowledge that Bella refused to go out with me and that the rest of the pack considered us pretty much dating anyway. Bella's something else, that's for sure, Jared said thoughtfully. Are we sure she's just running away though? The entire pack turned to look at him. I mean, anyone in their right mind would be running like their lives depended on it, Paul scoffed. Although she was running with vampires before, so. That's not what I meant, dude. Obviously, she doesn't know we can help her because Sam told Jake not to tell her about us and she called early while no one was home, so we haven't been able to fill her in. But if it were me, I would be trying to find help from wherever I could. What if that's where she's going? My heart sank. Everyone else looked confused for a half second. The Cullens, Embry breathed suddenly. Right. Would they even help her against one of their own kind? Paul snorted. Embry shrugged. But they left her, I said softly. Sam gave me a pitying look. Yeah, but if the choice was that or death, of course she'd picked it. The question is, does she know where they are? I shook my head. I'm almost positive she didn't when she left, at least. She doesn't like talking about them, but she left her computer on once and I saw a bunch of returned emails she'd tried to send to Alice Cullen. She mentioned once that they'd gone to law, but I kind of feel like that's the last place a group of vamps who like blending in with humans would go, so it was probably just a cover. Sam nodded. So this is all well and good, but how does this affect us? Paul asked. We can't go looking for her or anything. I guess all we can do is just keep Victoria from realizing she's left as long as we can, Sam said. Did you guys see her out there tonight? Paul shook his head. We didn't see her, but there were fresh trails, Jared clarified. She's still hanging around. Embry nodded and drained his cup of coffee. I guess that's that then, he said, standing up. Sion and Jake were up for patrol. 10 minutes later found Embry and I loping through the woods when suddenly Embry whirled around to face me. Dude, what? My brain scrambled to think of what he had been thinking about. Are you really just going to let Bella run around the Continentalis without any idea of where she's going? Whoa. I dunno, man, I don't exactly know where the leeches moved on to. Besides, I don't exactly want to give the girl I'm madly in love with the directions she needs to run back into her ex-arms. Even if it means she winds up dead, I snarled at him, but in true Embry fashion, he ignored me. He was right though. If I truly loved Bella, wouldn't I do anything I could to help keep her safe? Of course I would. I sighed. Alright doofus. Where do we start? Embry barked a laugh. There's no we here, dum-dum. You know how shitty I am at keeping Sam out of my head, and you know he would shut this down as soon as he caught wind of this. As far as I'm concerned, nothing happened. But, he added as he turned around and started running again. If it were me, Daho start with googling drive. Vamp. For the first time since I officially became a Cullen, I had no plans. In every town we'd lived in, I always did something. I handled the family's investments. Most of the time I participated in school of various levels. Once Daho worked as a receptionist. But now, I had nothing to do other than spend time with Esm. Esm couldn't be more thrilled to have me home. During the day, I followed her around the house, helping her with whatever house project she was working on and chatting to her about every light-hearted topic I could think of. True to Jasper's words, Carlisle was hardly ever around the house, which left me providing the majority of Esm's companionship. She loved it, and I knew Jasper enjoyed sharing the load of looking out for her, but after a week I was starting to get restless. I needed something to work on other than carrying out Esm's plans for interior decorating and gardening. Unfortunately, my gift would be useless here. My visions could help me decide which ideas would be good ones to pursue, but they were entirely useless when I had no ideas to begin with. You could engage in charity work, Esm suggested one day as I dragged my feet helping her move furniture back into the room that would hopefully someday be Edward's. That's not a bad idea, I said thoughtfully. On more than one occasion one of us had used our excess resources to anonymously solve a problem of some sort. Most of Carlisle's contributions revolved around medical research. Esm often devoted her efforts to helping women leave abusive situations. Access to humane mental health support, maybe, she suggested. I don't know, I hedged. It was a good idea, but despite my newfound connection to my past, it still didn't feel right. A quick glance into the future confirmed my hesitancy. Besides, I continued more confidently. Mental health support will become a lot easier to access soon, and there are other groups that are already working on reducing the stigma around mental health. What would you want to do then? She asked. I'm not sure exactly what I'll do yet, I said carefully. It wasn't a total lie. What I wanted to do was look into Bella's future and pick something for the sister that I wasn't allowed to openly support anymore. There was just the whole issue with Edward refusing to let me intentionally look for her. It's for Bella, isn't it? Esme said softly. Startled, I glanced up at her and she was looking at me with a soft, almost pitying look. How did you know? I asked. This was a wish I kept so close to my heart, even Jasper hadn't heard about it yet. Esme chuckled. You may be the seer, dear, but I'm your mother. I know you miss her just as much as I do. Edward would be so mad, I whispered. Esme nodded, encouraging me to continue. But it's just not fair. I sounded like a toddler. I didn't care. Now that Daho started, the words were all trying to come out at once. Edward knows how important she is to all of us, and we're still not allowed to have anything to do with her. Just going to have a hard life most humans do, and we're not allowed to make it any easier at all. How is that fair to literally anyone? As wordlessly pulled me into a hug and I let my head rest against her shoulder for a brief minute. And because it was Esme and she would understand, I finally said I don't know how to live my life not being able to show her how much I care about her, and I think I hate Edward for forcing this on me. I'll let you in a little secret, Esme said softly. I think I do too. I jerked my head up to stare at her. She had a wry smile on her lips, but her eyes were far away. Gentle Esme, the heart of our family, had just admitted to hating my brother. I had expected understanding of where I was coming from, but certainly not this. Or at least. No, I don't think you do, I challenged cautiously. She shrugged. Maybe hate is a strong word, she amended. But tell me, Alice, what can I possibly feel about the son who took away my youngest daughter? She fidgeted with the bracelet on her wrist as if suddenly nervous. While I love Edward too much to hate him truly, it feels as though by not hating him, I'm betraying Bella even more. Does that make sense? I laughed. I don't know, it sounds pretty messed up to me. Maybe you need to have a chat with Jasper about all this. Believe it or not, this level of clarity comes after speaking with Jasper many times. Selfishly, I'm glad you insisted he stay here with me. I reached out and put my hand on Esme's arm, but she didn't seem to notice. This wasn't something I had seen. My reasons for making him stay were purely selfish, but I wasn't surprised to hear that he had supported Esme during this time. Early in his second life, Jasper had spent many decades using his gift to control others. Maria used it to both sedate and incite newborns, depending on whether she wanted them docile or fierce. He used it to control her, allowing him to survive and thrive in the harsh climate of the Southern Wars. When we met, Jasper was trying not to use his gift. The guilt at feeling the emotions of all his victims, as well as the loneliness from not having any friendships that weren't based on control, was slowly eating him alive. But when we joined our family, he finally realized that he could use his talent as a gift. Instead of using it to control others, he learned that he could use it to make lives softer, easier, for those he considered family. It was a gentle support that everyone in the family appreciated, and I'm sure right now, Esme had never been more grateful for it. Hey Alice, have you had any visions recently? Jasper called from down the hall. I frowned. No, should I have? Jasper sighed. It's probably nothing, but someone's been trying to find us on the internet. Esme and I shared a look and slipped out of Edward's room and down the hallway. What are they searching? I asked as I opened the door to Jasper's private study. Nothing specific. They searched each of our names, then added Doctor to Carlos's search. Would they have found anything? Esme asked nervously. I don't think so, he said. I keep all traces of our previous locations off the internet and just make any current web pages about us directly unlisted on the search engine. Esme nodded, relief flooding her face. I couldn't say I wasn't relieved either. As much as I loathed the circumstances that brought us to Ithaca, none of us wanted to move again so quickly. Look where the search requests are coming from, Jasper said heavily. My eyes followed his finger to the portion of the screen it was indicating. Port Angeles. That's not so unusual, I finally said after a moment of silence. It's pretty common for someone to get curious and try to find us after we've moved on. Usually a previous co-worker of Carlos's, as added. I didn't need Edward's gift to know that we were all thinking the same thing. That this time was different. This was the first time we'd left someone important behind. The sound of Carlos's Mercedes grumbled up the driveway too loud in the contemplative silence. It was the first time I'd been home in nearly 2 days. Jasper noticed the tightening of Esme's jaw a half-second before I did. Esme, we can't, he said forcefully. What if she's trying to find us because she needs us? Esme argued. Would Edward truly have us stand by if her life was in danger? To be fair, if her life was truly at risk, she probably wouldn't be sitting at the computer googling us, Jasper said wryly. Esme Carlyle called from the hallway. In Jasper's study, dear, she replied. We think Bella is trying to find us. Is she in danger? Carlyle asked. Jasper doesn't think so, at least, I muttered. This isn't the first time she has tried to contact us, Jasper pointed out. It was true. I winced as I remembered the dozens of emails she sent me in the months after Wed left. Emails that I had to pretend lay undelivered for fear I would lose the battle not to answer them. But we can't turn our backs on her if she truly needs us, argued Esme. Alice, in her most recent emails, did Bella give any indication that anything was amiss other than her missing us? I shook my head. She was heartbroken and angry but had otherwise seemed fine. And you haven't had any visions indicating that she's in danger? Again I shook my head. I'm not looking intentionally, I reminded him. But no. What if we had Alice look now, just to make sure? Esme asked quickly. Edward said not to for a reason, Jasper cut in.
If Alice saw that she was safe, but miserable, would that really be good enough for you? Esme's eyes lowered, but she didn't say anything, so Jasper continued.
She loved him, but she's human. She's going to need more than a few months to be okay again, but it will happen. We know that, I said bitterly. This isn't about whether she's happy or not. This is whether about she's in danger or not. Carlyle, don't pretend you don't know what Edward's next move will be if anything happens to her. It was a low blow. I knew that. No one missed the brief flash of panic that flew into Carlyle's eyes and the glare that Esme shot me. I had crossed a line. But as low a blow as it was, no one could deny it was effective. After a few minutes of contemplation, Carlyle sighed and his shoulders slumped. Suddenly, he looked every minute of his 300 years. All right, go ahead, Alice. Just this once. I didn't need to be told twice. I blinked in the sudden sunlight. The smell of gasoline was heavy in the still, hot air. I glanced around. It seemed like I was in an average, rundown gas station. I looked around for Bella and found her quickly. Or rather, I found her van quickly. She was standing at pump sharp 4, leaning against the van with her arms crossed and her eyes were carefully darting around the gas station as if searching for something. She looked tired and nervous, but not especially panicked. Oh Bella, I miss you, I thought desperately, and suddenly, like she heard me, her eyes snapped to stare at me. Shock made me pull out of the vision. My family waited patiently as I gathered my bearings. God, I can't believe she actually bought that ugly van, was the first thing out of my mouth. Carlyle raised an eyebrow, but I rushed forward. She's thinner than she was. And she looks tired, I added, remembering the dark circles under her eyes. But she was fine otherwise, Carlyle asked. I nodded. Esme smiled in relief. Good, then she was probably just googling us out of curiosity, Jasper nodded. In his mind, all loose ends were tied up. Firm, it probably was, but something was niggling in the back of my mind. She wasn't the one googling us. I said suddenly. Carlyle and Esme, who were preparing to leave, turned back towards me, waiting. The vision, it happened somewhere down south. It was hot and dry. And there were cacti, I added, remembering that detail. Jasper shrugged. Even better, he said. So it was just a curious classmate or colleague after all. I nodded slowly, but couldn't help but feel a pang of disappointment. Jasper was right. She truly did seem okay and like she was moving on. And that was good for her, I supposed. But selfishly, I couldn't deny that I had been hoping for the excuse to go see her. I know, darling, Jasper whispered softly. It's not fair. I turned to him and smiled as best as I could. As long as she's not miserable, that will be enough for me. For now, I added quickly before he got the wrong idea. And in the meantime, I just have to hope my idiot brother comes to his senses sooner rather than later. Google turned up nothing. It's not like I was expecting a phone number or anything, but at least a little blurb about a talented doctor new to the hospital would have given me a general area to work with. What if they used different names when they moved on, was Embry's suggestion one day when he was lounging on the couch and I was staring at the computer trying to think of other things to type into the search engine. The thought had occurred to me. After all, how were century-old bloodsuckers supposed to stay under the radar if someone from an old town could just look them up? The problem was, I had no clue where to start looking for different names. Bella had never mentioned anything, of course. She avoided saying the Cullens' names if at all possible anyway. Embry, in true Embry fashion, couldn't help but get involved after all, and he had taken to searching things like hiking doctor and doctor adopts a bunch of kids. That's pretty impressive, someone had to have written about that, he said when I raised an eye at the search terms. But no one did, and once again we were stuck. It was a small mercy that Embry and I had still managed to keep Sam in the dark about what was going on. Bella had called twice more. The first time was at 3 a.m. and no one made it to the phone in time.
I wanted to change the answering machine to leave a message for her, but Billy had rightfully pointed out that it would let Charlie know that she was contacting us.
The next time she had called the Clearwater house. This is when I had a sinking feeling that she was actively trying to avoid talking to us. Of course, it had been Leah who answered and she was no help. In fact, Bella's flight seemed to inspire Leah and she decided to go on her own soul-searching journey. Sue and Harry were worried of course, but this wasn't the first time Leah had run off on her own and she was always back within a few weeks. She was due to call again the next day and I was getting desperate. By now, the redhead leech had moved on. After 3 days since we last scented her, I finally had to admit that she was no longer around.
I wasn't dumb enough to hope that maybe she had just gotten bored and left, but I could still hope that maybe a week enough was enough of a head start for Bella, especially if she was smart and didn't leave much of a paper trail.
Billy turned out to be a surprising ally in my quest to dig up dirt on the Cullens.
He agreed with me that the Cullens likely would help Bella and, like me, his affection for his best friend's daughter overruled his disgust and fear of the creatures she was looking for.
He didn't have much more than I did though. The phone number the doc had given him when they moved to the area was no longer in service and they hadn't left any sort of forwarding address. When I emerged from the tree line behind my house, I was surprised to see Charlie's cruiser parked in front of the garage. In the past weeks, Harry and Billy had been over there several times but, to my knowledge this was the first time he'd been in Lawpush since he and Billy had fallen out. Charlie was kind of the last person I wanted to see because I knew from Billy that he thought I was the reason she left. I understood where he was coming from, but it was still hard to take. Billy, Charlie, and Harry all looked up when I came in the door and I gave an awkward wave. "Hey Charlie, how are you holding up?" "About as well as it looks like you are, kid," he said bitterly. "I was just telling your dad and Harry that I found Bella's truck today." A burst of hope flared in my chest and was dashed almost immediately when he glanced at me and said, "Don't get too excited. It was sold to a seedy little dealership in Wyoming. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions. Sounds like after she sold it, she left on foot. Maybe planning on taking a train or a bus from there." He groaned. "She could be in Alaska by now." "Alaska?" Billy guffed. "You're nuts, Charlie. Bella hates the cold, why would she go to Alaska?" "I dunno, Billy. But if she's trying to find him," Charlie disliked saying their name just as much as his daughter did. "That's where Daho start. Apparently he has cousins up there." "Oh, do they?" Billy queried with a forced casualness. Harry, who had been reading a fishing magazine in the armchair, straightened up and was looking at Charlie with rapt attention. Charlie didn't seem to notice. "Yeah, in a little town called Denali Park." I leaned in towards him. "Did she mention if the Cullens had any other relatives?" I asked eagerly. Charlie barked a laugh. "We've got the same train of thought, kid. She didn't, but he mentioned that had been born in Chicago by the name Edward Mason. I have a friend of mine working for the city looking into birth records there." Harry and Billy shared a look. "Charlie, I thought Bella asked you not to go digging," Harry said gently. Charlie rolled his eyes. "You hypocritical son of a bitch. I know damn well that as soon as you found Lee's note you called around trying to find out where she was going even though she asked you not to." As Harry and Billy lapsed into the now familiar speech about Charlie not knowing what he was getting himself into with this search, I slipped back out the door and started heading for Embry's house. The family's minivan wasn't home, so I let myself in with the spare key and flung open his bedroom door. Embry started upright, looking around his room wildly. When saw me, he groaned and rubbed his face. "Jake, what the hell, man, I just got to sleep. The Cullens have cousins in Alaska." I croaked triumphantly. "And a connection to Chicago?" Embry's jaw dropped. "Jake, you're not really thinking of..." He trailed off. I could guess what he saw in my face. The dread and misery that had only gotten worse since Bella's disappearance was probably replaced by determination and excitement. Certainly it had been weeks since Daho felt this alive. "Sam just said that I couldn't follow Bella," I pointed out. "He said nothing about paying Cullen relatives a visit." "Yeah, because we didn't expect to find Cullen relatives," Embry said. "We're already stretched thin enough on patrols. Besides, how would you get to Alaska?" I cocked an eyebrow. "It would only be, like, a day of running." Embry chuckled.
"Yeah, doofus, a day of running there, a day of running back, and what, 2 days there to find the trail and track them down? You can't just disappear for 4 days.
He shook his head. "Jake, this is nuts. What if they're not like the Cullens? Like what if they eat people?" "Hadn't thought of that," I muttered. Embry nodded quickly. "And we don't even know how many there are. You can't do this, Jake. Chasing after the coven of leeches we have a treaty with is one thing. But going after another coven we have no info on by yourself, that's insanity. Well, love makes you do crazy things." I shrugged. Now are you going to tell Sam so he can stop me, or are you going to trust that I know what I'm doing and need a little vacation? Embry groaned. There's no way we can keep this from him anymore, he warned. Even if somehow I managed to not think about where you were, he'll notice once you stop turning up to patrols. Sure, I flashed a grin at Embry.
But it's Sam, as long as I'm out of mind range before he notices, he won't ditch the reservation to come looking for me, and I can deal with the fallout when I get back.
Besides, if I can manage to get a message out to the Cullens so they can look for her too, then whatever Sam has me doing when I get back as punishment will be worth it.
As it turned out, Embry didn't need to keep this from Sam because he was waiting for me when I phased.
Jake, you will not go to Alaska to find the other coven.
In fact, you will not leave the Olympic Peninsula at all to look for Bella, the Cullens, or anything else that might be related to Bella's disappearance.
Is that clear? The force of the Alpha Command dropped me to the ground. Fine, I thought sullenly. How did you know? Your dad called me as soon as you left the house. He told me what Charlie said to you. Jake, it's suicide to walk into a nest of cold ones when we don't know anything about them. We don't know how many there are or whether they share the Cullens' hunting habits. Yeah, Embry said the same thing. Go home, Jake. Take a nap and then be up at midnight to wait for Bella's call. As much as I wanted to be angry with Sam for interrupting my plans, I couldn't. He was being surprisingly helpful with all this. He didn't have to, but since Bella's second call had given me every third day off patrol so I could wait for the next one. He did truly want to help her, he just didn't want to do it at the expense of one of his pack. He wasn't the one in love with Bella. He didn't think she was worth the risk. Sorry, Jake, Dad said as I came in the front door. I glared at him. How did you even know I was going to go? I asked. He chuckled. I've been your dad for 16 years. I can tell when you're getting ready to sneak out. He patted the seat of the chair next to him and I sat down. This doesn't mean we won't act on this information, he said softly. But we have to come up with a better plan than you sailing off on your own to Alaska. I nodded, a sudden lump in my throat. I don't know if she has enough time for us to do anything else, I whispered hoarsely. Billy pulled me into a rough hug. We'll find her, Jake. Don't worry. Rosalie and Emmett finally came home about a week after I checked on Bella. Jasper had class and Esm was making a road trip into the hospital to see Carlisle, so it was just me at home drawing when I got a vision that they would pull into the driveway that evening. I grinned and pulled out my phone to call Esm. Guess what? Esm, Rose and Emmett will be back tonight. Esm sighed happily through the phone. That's wonderful, Alice. I'm almost done at the hospital here.
Would you believe that even after I came to visit, some of the nurses still aren't convinced that Carlisle is married? I snickered.
It was a familiar dance. Whenever Carlisle started at a new hospital, Esm would invariably have to make a few visits to convince some of his more lusty co-workers that she was real and that they were madly in love. They're like that everywhere, I reassured her. They'll settle down soon enough when Carlisle keeps turning them down. Thanks for telling me about Rose and Emmett. Will they need anything that I can pick up for them in town? I quickly decided to ask them when they got in and checked the vision. No, they're fine. Rose has been shopping in Europe. Esm and I shared a quiet laugh. Alright, he'll be home soon then. Jasper's class finishes at 4. That's right, he should beat Rose and Emmett here by about 25 minutes. But Jasper didn't beat them home by 25 minutes. Esm was home within the hour as promised, and then she and I set up Rosalie in Emmett's room. When Carlisle came home from the hospital at 4:45, I finally decided to check on Jasper. The vision was of him sitting on a grassy portion in a central part of the university with his back against a tree and his hat pulled over his eyes. He looked for all the world like an exhausted university student taking a nap. Did he just get delayed? Esm asked, seeing my frown. I don't think so. I'm not sure what he's doing, but I'm going to give him a call. I stepped on the porch before pressing the call button. As usual, Jasper picked up on the first ring. Hey darling. Is everything okay? Everything's fine here, I said, feeling more and more like an overanxious teenager. I was just wondering if you would be home soon. I know your class ended a while ago. Yeah, I just had to take care of something. You usually don't call to check up on me if I'm home later. He was right. Yeah, I know, but Rose and Emmett will be home tonight. I didn't let you know earlier because I thought you'd be home by now. That's great. Yeah, I'll be home in a bit. His voice softened. You sure you're alright? Don't worry, Jazz, I said, smiling softly. I just miss you. Love you too, he chuckled, then disconnected the call. 15 minutes later found a bright red BMW pulling into the driveway while Esm, Carlisle and I waited on the porch. Emmett practically bounced up to the porch to pull me and Esm into a hug, and Rosalie followed behind at a more dignified pace. I missed you, Emmett said in his booming voice. Rose loves her time away with just us, but it's just not the same without the family. Behind him, Rosalie rolled her eyes. I was surprised to see that she looked almost relaxed. A soft smile played on her lips and she was looking at Esm with fondness. I missed you, Mom, she said, throwing her arms around Esm. She also offered Carlisle a more tentative hug, and he beamed at Esm over her shoulder. Rosalie loved Carlisle, but their history kept her from showing it as frequently as she offered affection to Esm. Well, come on in then, Esm said happily.
Jasper's not home yet, but the rest of us would love to hear what you two have been up to these last 3 months.
Where's Jasper? Rosalie asked. He's at the university, I said brightly. Emmett laughed. No way, he's finally getting his first degree, good for him. And he's doing very well, Esm said. We are so proud of him. This place is looking really nice, Esm. Rosalie said. Are you finished decorating or is there still more to do? Almost finished. Alice and I moved furniture into your room this morning. Would you like to come see? Rosalie nodded and took Esm's hand as they climbed the stairs. As soon as they were out of sight, Emmett moved to stand over by the gallery wall. He reached up a finger to brush the picture of Bella gently. I noticed that he was no longer smiling. I miss her too, I whispered. Rose gets mad when I talk about her, he sighed quietly. She likes it when I just pretend like nothing's wrong. I raised my eyebrow. How's that working out for you? If there was one thing my boisterous brother was not known for, it was keeping his feelings to himself. Not great, he barked a laugh. That's part of the reason we came home. We missed you guys of course, but I need Rosalie not with me 247 so I don't have to pretend everything's okay all the time. This whole time, Rosalie and Esm hadn't stopped chatting happily upstairs, but I still kept my voice low as I responded. Why did she want to come then? We're not going to hide how much we miss her around here. Emmett chuckled. Oh, I know. That's why I wanted to come home. I told Rose she could either come with me or stay in New York. My jaw dropped. Emmett loved Rosalie. He doted on her and treated her like a princess. As far as I knew, this was the first time he'd decided on something that went against what she wanted. That bad, huh? Yikes, I said softly. Well, now that you're here, do you want me to tell you what I've seen from Bella recently? Emmett nodded eagerly. Well, she sold her truck and bought this van. Oh, it's so ugly, I grimaced at the memory. And I think she's been traveling around down south. She's actually doing better than I thought she would, Emmett said thoughtfully. Maybe Edward was right after all. I glared at him. No way. She's gotten too thin. And she hasn't been sleeping. I think she's trying to distract herself, but she's in no way fine. Emmett sighed. Yeah, fair enough. I was cut off by Rosalie calling from upstairs. Emmett, can you start bringing our bags in from the car? Carlisle will help you. Oh, I will I? Carlisle chuckled from the living room. But he had already put down his book and risen out of his seat. Later, I mouthed at Emmett and he nodded. Anyways, Emmett and I were talking about going on a vacation up north to see the Denali's, Rosalie was saying as she and Esm came downstairs. Esm's face fell. Oh, is that right? You just got here though. Rosalie nodded. I know, but if Emmett and I are starting lives here, we figured it would be easier to go now before people would notice we're gone. Alice, she said, turning to me. Can you check on the Denali's and see if they have any visitors right now? It was something Daho done before. Once in the 1970s, would shown up for a visit while Kate and Tanya had some male guests over. Emmett frequently joked that the trip was the reason Edward is such a prude now. I nodded and let myself search out the results of Rosalie's decision. The vision showed Elazar sitting in the great room. The doorbell rang and then nothing. I pulled myself out of the vision, confusion clearly written on my face. That's weird, I muttered. What happened? Rosalie asked. I looked for Elazar and the vision was showing him at home alone, but then the doorbell rang and it went black. Esm frowned. Try again, she encouraged. I nodded and reached out with my gift. This time there was no vision at all. Only darkness. I pulled myself back towards reality and glanced worriedly at Esm. Nothing at all this time. What's the problem? Carlisle asked as he entered the house with an armload of Rosalie's bags. Jasper was right behind him, apparently having been roped into helping upon arrival. Alice can't see the Denali's. Carlisle frowned. Perhaps I should phone Elazar to ensure that all is well, he said. Can you see everyone else normally? After a quick check I sighed in relief. Yes, I can see all of us, both today and tomorrow. Esm sighed in relief and Carlisle nodded. That's good. I'll call Elazar. Please let me know if you start to be able to see them again. I turned to Rosalie. Sorry, I said. It looks like they were about to get guests when the vision cut off, but I couldn't see who it was. Rosalie pouted. Do not fret, my Princess Petal Blossom, Emmett said, dipping Rosalie in his arms until she giggled. We will just have to go later this spring. Yes. Esm said. Maybe we can all go as a family. It's been so long since we've been up to Alaska. A vacation is just what this family needs. My heart sank. I didn't need a vision to tell me that there was no way the whole family would be going. I thought about saying something to that effect, but seeing that Esm looked properly happy for the first time since they'd left Forks, I decided to keep that thought to myself. Despite what Emmett likes to say, I can keep things to myself occasionally. I knew I had one last check to make though. For my best friend's sake, I needed to make extra sure that the issue with my visions was only with Alaska. To miss something happening with Bella would be disastrous. Bella was sitting inside of a dim box with shaded windows. I knew instantly that this was the interior of the ugly van. A shag carpet covered the floor and the seats were replaced by a thin mattress. Various pieces of open luggage were strewn around the van and Bella herself was sitting on the floor eating some kind of instant noodle out of a cup. I pulled myself out of my vision with a frown on my face. This wasn't just a bit of traveling. It looked like she was living out of that van. I tried to remember the sorts of things I had seen her eating before we left. In the past, she tended towards a fairly healthy diet with plenty of vegetables and protein. She enjoyed pasta, but Daho never seen her eat it out of styrofoam before. Suddenly her increasingly prominent collarbones made sense. If she was eating like that, there was no way she was getting proper nutrition. My frown deepened as I attempted to check on Charlie. All I could find was the same blackness in Alaska. Alice, are you okay? Jasper's voice pulled me back to the present. Upstairs, I heard the chatter in Rosalie's room die down as the occupants stilled to listen. Jasper, I can't see Forks either. How would you know? You're not supposed to be looking in Forks, he said. I checked a bunch of places. I wanted to make sure the problem with my vision was just Denali. But it's not. I nodded in agreement. Jasper picked up my hand. I think you're too stressed. Come for a hunt with me, darling. I didn't point out that we had just hunted a few days ago. I was suddenly anxious to get out of the house as well. We were walking hand in hand along the stream when Jasper finally asked me what was in his mind. Before you called me, did you happen to see what I was doing at the university? I nodded, waiting for him to explain. I've been trying to work on my control. Being around that many people at once is helping. I gasped. Jasper, what if something happens? What if someone bleeds? There's no one there with you to help you. Jasper sighed. I know, and that's why I'm doing this now. I don't want to rely on other people to stop me anymore. And believe it or not, it's easier when there aren't any other vampires around. I have a theory about that. I wonder if I'm subconsciously receiving everyone's bloodlust along with my own and it's making my control worse. Anyway, I just need this to get better. We may never have another Bella Swan in our lives, but still. If our family ever recovers from this, I can't be the one to break us again. I can't do this to you again. His dark eyes stared into mine, begging me to understand. And I did. He wasn't the only one who regretted what happened. And he certainly wasn't the only one who would give anything to keep history from repeating itself. This is a bad idea, Jake. Embry whispered into my mind. He was 50 yards away, staring after me as I crept towards the clearing. I cautiously sniffed the air. I could smell the stale scent of the redhead and the older scent of the black-haired leech, but nothing fresh. It'll be fine, Embry. Slowly, I crept past the tree line. The Cullens' massive house stood in the center, dark and imposing. The windows were shuttered and the grass in the lawn was long and meadow-like. Pacing forward, sniffed at the porch. Still nothing new. Holy crap, is that a 4-car garage? Embry thought from his place at the edge of the forest. Their house is massive. They're loaded, what did you expect? I can respect using money like that for a place to park a lot of cars. I almost could anyways, if I pretended they weren't leeches who tore my true love apart. Making a quick decision, I phased and tugged a pair of shorts out of my sack. From the forest, Embry whined. He was nervous about coming here. The idea to find the Cullens' old place and search here had been his, but he had never been super into the idea of coming here himself. I didn't blame him. Even weeks old, the scent of vampire was oppressive and the atmosphere was almost menacing. But it was the only thing I could think of to try that didn't involve leaving the Olympic Peninsula. I have to go inside, I called back to him. They definitely didn't leave a forwarding address sitting out on the porch. I quickly pulled the lock-picking kit Rachel had given me for my 14th birthday out of the pack. A few seconds after starting to pick the lock, I heard soft, human footsteps behind me. At once I felt a rush of appreciation for my pack brother. No matter how much he disagreed with me, I could truly count on him to have my back. You're doing it wrong, Embry muttered. The bottom one has to press down. Let me try. I relinquished the tools to Embry and sat back on my heels. It took several minutes, but finally we heard soft click and Embry whooped triumphantly. This is definitely breaking the treaty by the way, he said. Running around on their property is one thing, but breaking into their house, I shrugged. They'll know anyway if we find anything. And if we don't, then we'll be long gone by the time they come back to the area. My eyebrows rose in surprise as I entered the front room. Instead of it being empty like I had expected, the house appeared to be fully set up with sheets covering all the furniture. Dust floated through the air, making my nose itch. Dude, check it out. They do pictures like Jared's mom does. I turned around to where Embry was looking and my jaw dropped when I saw a huge wall full of photographs. Each of the Cullens exactly the same age they were now, in various combinations. A lump rose in my throat when I realized that Bella was featured in several of them. Often with the boyfriend or a short girl with black hair. Do you think these photos are actually legit or are they just staged so the Cullens appear normal for visitors? The ones with Bella aren't staged, at least, I said slowly. She's not that good of an actor. My eyes roamed over the pictures and I felt a thread of confusion start to work its way into my mind. I wasn't entirely sure what I had been expecting coming here, but it was definitely something along the lines of cobwebs, coffins and bloodstains. Not massive windows and happy family photographs. This doesn't make sense, Embry whispered. They put her on the wall with their family. Why would they leave? I mean, there's other people on here too. I gestured to a picture close to the edge of the gallery wall, where the doc and his wife were playing a board game with another couple. Hey, they have gold eyes too. I wonder if those are the cousins Charlie was talking about. I nodded thoughtfully. If they're family though, it doesn't exactly prove your point. Who cares, I said, wrenching myself away from the pictures. Let's search the house. The more we poked around the main floor, the more it looked like just a standard family home full of regular humans. The kitchen had appliances and cookbooks. The living room had shelves filled with DVDs and board games. Peeking under the sheet covering the coffee table, I found a basket with an assortment of plush blankets. Idly, I wondered if vampires could get cold, or if they had just kept those there for Bella. Holy crap, Jake, get over here, Embry called from down the hall. I followed his voice and found him peeking through a darkened door. It took my eyes a second to adjust to the pitch blackness, but when they did. Holy crap, I echoed.
The garage was mostly empty, but parked. Right in the center was a top-of-the-line Aston Martin.
So that explains the huge garage, Embry said. Look at her, Jake, she's beautiful. Seriously, Embry, what is going on here? I ran my fingers through my hair. Why on earth would they leave that beauty behind? Embry shook his head. I don't know, but maybe they wouldn't mind if we took her for a spin. Just to keep the engine running smoothly, of course. I chuckled. Says the guy who was so concerned about just coming into the house 20 minutes ago. I'm pretty sure Grand Theft Auto is worse. At least let me go touch it, Embry whined. Come on, I pulled him out of the garage. What if you scratch it or something? Besides, we have to keep looking. Embry let me pull him down the hall but then shook my hand off his arm. I didn't find anything down here, he said. Should we try upstairs? There wasn't a ton upstairs either. Like before, most of the rooms were covered in sheets. 2 of them had wall-to-wall bookshelves empty of books. Many of the rooms had beds hidden underneath sheets. There were 2 standard-looking bathrooms. Finally, we came to the last room on the left. Dude, look, Embry moaned in delight. My jaw dropped. This room had floor-to-ceiling shelves with every CD imaginable. This is awesome, I said. I wonder whose room this is. Nah, Embry said. There's no bed in here. This is just a room for listening to music. Sweet. I looked around. He was right. The only pieces of furniture were a covered table by the window and an uncovered leather couch in the center of the room. That's weird, I muttered. They've covered everything else. Suddenly Embry gave a wild whoop and lunged forward. Jake, we found it. He turned around and waved a large manila envelope at me. An envelope that had been sitting on the couch, waiting to be found. There was only one word on the envelope, written in beautiful, rounded handwriting. Bella. Embry passed the envelope to me and I started to peel it open with trembling fingers. I had it almost opened when I stopped. Did I really want to read what the vampire had written to her? I had no problems invading the leech's privacy and scouring their home for a forwarding address, but this was different. This was Bella's privacy I was about to violate. Hey man, want me to do it? Embry said softly. I nodded and passed him the envelope. He finished ripping it open and dumped the contents on the couch. The first thing I saw was a passport. I opened it and saw Bella's face looking at me beside the words Bella Mason. Look, there's a birth certificate, driver's license, and a credit card, all with the same name, Embry pointed out, gathering all the offending documents into his hands. They made a whole ass fake identity for her. Blinding rage ripped through my body and I threw the passport back onto the couch before I could destroy it. This is insane, I yelled, leaping to my feet. First just part of the family and they make fake documents for her and fill their house with stuff just for her, and then they just leave overnight. What the hell is going on? They obviously wanted her to find this stuff. There's a letter too, Embry said. Should I open it? I nodded and watched with bated breath as he unfolded the flowery stationery and started reading down the letter. Finally, he looked back at me. It's not from him, but it's also not gonna be easy to read. It's what we were looking for though. Do you think you can read it without accidentally tearing it to shreds? I took a steadying breath and nodded. If this letter was the key to ensuring Bella's safety, I would guard it with my life. Embry passed me the letter. Bella. Edward wanted us to leave you alone so he doesn't know I'm writing this. He thinks you'll be better off without vampires in your life, but Esmond, I disagree. I couldn't leave you with no help at all. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I have a bad feeling about this. Jasper had Jenks make up these fake documents when you were on the run in Phoenix in March. They're yours if you need them. The credit card is yours too. Please, the please was underlined 3 times. Don't hesitate to use it if you need to. I'll take care of it. The pin is Edward's birth year. Lastly, Edward forbade me from looking for you, but if something happens and you truly need our help, just make a drastic decision that puts your life at risk. I'll see it and I'll get in touch. I'm so sorry, Bella. You're my best friend and I never wanted to leave you like this. Love you forever and ever. Alice. Even though I had told Embry I wouldn't destroy the letter, I still had to fight to keep my fists from curling. Somehow that letter was even more infuriating than Bella's with the number of questions it raised without answers. What does she mean? Shall see it? Embry asked. I shook my head and started pacing the room. I dunno, Em. But all this is driving me crazy. Somehow the leech knew Bella would need this, but she didn't find it in time. And what the hell, apparently Bella has already been on the run in Phoenix. Wait, you didn't know about that? Of course not. I'm assuming Alice is referring to when she broke her leg during spring break last year, but Charlie was told she fell through a window. Holy shit, I said, sitting down suddenly. No wonder she peeled when the redhead came back if that's what she did before. But before, the Cullens were around to help her. Embry groaned. Damn it, Jake. As much as Sam's gonna give us hell for this, we need to get him involved. The only way for Bella to know how to reach the Cullens is if anyone who could answer the phone has this information. Embry grimaced. Hold on just a minute, I said, an idea starting to form. If Alice is taking care of the credit card, wouldn't she see it being used? Maybe we could find a way to get her a message using it. Do we know Edward's birth year? I sighed. No, but Charlie is looking into birth records for Edward Mason. We can see if he found anything. Embry shrugged and turned to go down the stairs. I guess if saves us from the wrath of Sam, it's worth a shot. Embry paused by the gallery wall. Do you know which one's Alice? I glanced up at the pictures. The little one with black hair, I think. Embry nodded thoughtfully. She looks nice. For a vampire, I mean. And she obviously loves Bella a lot. I nodded. If there was any doubt in my mind that at least one of them would be willing to help her, this letter banished it. We had the credit card, which would hopefully get their attention, and the note I slapped on the front door would alert them to what was going on if they showed up. Unfortunately, it didn't help with the question of the hour. If they cared so much, then why did they leave Bella in the first place? The blackness in Alaska only lasted for half an hour, but Forks continued to be shrouded in darkness. I was checking on Charlie several times a day, but only twice in the following week was I able to see anything. The first time I saw Charlie, he was sitting in his police cruiser. He held a paper cup of coffee in his hand, which had long since cooled down, and was staring vacantly out the window. The second time, Charlie was at home arguing with an elderly coiled man I recognized as Billy Black. I know you miss her, Charlie, but the girl's gotta find herself right now. Like she said in her letter, she'll be back when she's ready. In a way, that second vision reassured me. It hurt to see Charlie so upset. I couldn't deny that Daho grown fond of him in the weeks after Phoenix, but at least this vision reassured me that Bella wasn't living in that van out of necessity. If she was ever in trouble, she could go home. However, that knowledge did little to ease my concerns. As I continued to receive small, unexpected visions about her travels, the changes worried me. Her cheeks grew more hollow and the circles under her eyes grew darker every time I saw her. Even when I began looking for her intentionally, I couldn't find any reason for her travels or any sign of her returning home. Finally, one day after I came back from a vision where Bella screamed in her sleep, I couldn't take it any longer. Thankfully, Carlisle was already at home. A week after I arrived home, Jasper and I started asking him to do things with us when we knew he wouldn't be scheduled for a shift. At first, he seemed to want to be right back at the hospital, but as the weeks wore on, he began to relax at home and voluntarily spend more time with us again. Carlisle, would you like to go for a hunt with me and our family? Singling out a specific family member for a hunt implied needing to speak privately. Carlisle agreed, and I heard the rustle of paper as he closed his book and placed it on the side table. I grinned. Esme would tidy the book away, but I knew that she was thrilled to have a reason to tidy up after him again. Esme had come back to life as well. Rosalie, whose stubborn desire to pretend that forks never existed, was always talking to Esme about some design project or another. Between Rosalie's distraction, immense antics, and more frequent attention from Carlisle, Esme had lost that sad look that had seemed so permanent when I first arrived. It was only in quiet moments of solitude that I could see that she had not forgotten entirely about the missing members of our family. I've been looking for Bella again, I blurted out, as our run carried us near the stream where Jasper and I reunited after my return. Carlisle nodded. I'm not entirely surprised, he admitted. That was a completely unreasonable request for Edward to make. My heart lifted a little bit. Good, because I think she needs us. The words tumbled over each other as I rushed to get them out. She's still living in the van and she's having nightmares, and I don't think she's eating enough, and she's not. I stopped when he held up a hand. Alice, as much as it wasn't reasonable for Edward to expect you to not look at Bella's future, we can't interfere, he said, not unkindly. Rushing in and fixing things when she's sad won't help her learn to live without us. Were you even listening to what I was saying? I asked incredulously. She's not just sad. She didn't have weight to lose before we left, and yet she's lost it. She wakes up screaming from nightmares. This isn't about her emotional state. Her physical body is at risk, and you just want to play wait and see with it. Alice, that's enough, Carlisle said sharply. He might have said more, but once again, I was unexpectedly thrust into a vision. Bella was standing in front of a payphone, twisting the cord around her fingers nervously while waiting for it to ring. Finally, someone must have answered because she straightened up and started speaking. Oh, hi Billy, it's Bella. I wasn't expecting you to answer. No, I'm fine. No, stop. I can't come home. I have to go. Bye. And she hung up the phone quickly, obviously cutting off whoever was on the end. And slowly, with her back against the side of the phone booth, she sunk to the ground and rested her forehead against her knees. Her shoulders began shaking, and I knew she was crying. I pulled out of the vision to see Carlisle staring at me. The visions of her are coming more often, and I don't know what they mean, I muttered. I don't understand. Visions don't come for no reason. Something is wrong, but I can't tell what. All I know is that she's living in a car, eating barely enough to survive. Whatever sleep she does get seems to torture her, and now she's calling people just to hang up on them. Something is very deeply wrong, Carlisle, but I can't tell. What? I was yelling by the end, and I could feel my eyes stinging. I wasn't quite sure if they were stinging from rage or fear, but I was sure that if I had access to tears, I would have already ruined my new shirt. Carlisle's eyes widened in surprise. He hesitated for a moment and then nodded. I can't pretend to understand the ins and outs of your gift, and I can't deny it concerns me how strongly you feel about this. Carlisle stopped and considered for a moment. If she's in no immediate danger, then we'll watch closely for a week, and then we'll have a family meeting and decide what to do about this. He chuckled at my suspicious gaze. You expected a different response. Yes, I said honestly. You've been so intent on defending Edward's choice this whole time. He nodded sadly. And perhaps that's my mistake. You know that Esme and I consider Bella to be our youngest daughter. Even though Edward is my son and my first companion, she has physical needs that he does not. I will not sacrifice her health for the sake of his desires. I nodded, mollified. Thank you, Carlisle, I said sincerely. I don't want to see her suffer anymore if there's any way we can help. He nodded in understanding. Esme and I have discussed this frequently. I can't imagine how much worse it must be to have a visual of what is happening to her. I am so sorry I didn't listen to you before. Relief blossomed in my chest, and I impulsively reached out and wrapped my arms around Carlisle. He pressed a kiss into my hair. Look out for your sister Alice, he said softly. Then we'll decide how to help her as a family. When I got back to the house, Jasper was waiting for me outside. Carlisle and Esme quickly left for the hospital, and I could hear Emmett and Rosalie inside. Their choice of activities left me with a clear understanding of why Jasper had chosen to leave the house. My original plan for the day was to work on a mural in my and Jasper's bedroom. But when I saw the disturbed look on Jasper's face, I decided it could wait. It's not like they don't do it often, I teased gently.
Living in a group of mated pairs with very little privacy meant that we often had a partial witness to intimate moments. However, I knew that it was more difficult to ignore for both Jasper and Edward.
Jasper frowned and shook his head. Alice, why is Bella Mason's credit card being used? My dead heart leaped in my chest. First in surprise at the unexpected question and then at the thought that Bella had seen my letter. Honestly, I hadn't even expected her to use it, but I was pleased she had found it. This also meant she also knew how to contact me if she truly needed help. I left it for Bella in case she needed it. There wasn't much point in trying to pretend otherwise, and I was too giddy with relief to even try. I'm not sorry I did it either. I can tell from my limited visions that she hasn't been eating properly, and if money is the issue then this will help her. Alice, Jasper rubbed his forehead, something he did whenever he was particularly frustrated and trying to keep himself from saying something rash. Alice, you can't do this. You promised Edward you'd stay out of her life. Jasper, be honest with me.
Do you really believe that she deserves no help from us at all if she needs it? Jasper winced and turned away from me, but he couldn't quite hide the flash of misery my question sparked.
I almost felt a little bad, but this was something he needed to face. No, but she almost died because we were a part of her world. I almost killed her. She may be eating cheap cup noodles right now, but at least she's alive to eat them. I sighed. My love had a huge heart and he loved Bella almost as much as I did, but he had the wrong ideas about what Bella needed. Besides, he continued, she wasn't the one who found it. All the purchases were made recently in Seattle. Understanding washed over me, followed by a muted horror. Jasper watched the process grimly. Alice, what else did you leave with Bella when you left her the credit card? Fake IDs and a letter. Jasper closed his eyes and swore softly. It was very rare that I made a horrible mistake, but we both knew that this was one. If someone found the credit card, they could also read the letter where no secrets were kept. Not only that, but if they entered the house, then they would see decades of pictures featuring the same, unchanging people and other hints about our way of life. I felt sick. Jasper, I started. But he cut me off. I don't want Carlisle and Esme involved in this, he said firmly. They're hurting enough having to leave Bella, and with Edward gone, I'm taking Emmett on a hunting trip. We'll see what we can find, and if there are any threats, we'll take care of it. You still can't see forks? I shook my head numbly. Then hopefully you'll be able to tell if anyone is suspicious. Let me come, Jasper, I urged. It was my mistake and I should be the one to clean it up. Jasper shook his head. Darling, God knows I love you, but you're too close to this. Can you tell me honestly that you would be able to go anywhere near Forks without snooping around trying to find stuff about Bella? I sighed and shook my head. A grim smile played on Jasper's lips. Thought not. Besides, no one would suspect Emmett and I of breaking our promise to Edward. You're a different story. I swallowed hard. You'll let me know when you get there, he nodded. Always, darling. In light of our newest threat to our recently regained happiness, I forgot to tell Jasper what Carlisle and I had discussed. Perhaps things would have been different if I had. You what? Paul roared, launching himself to his feet. For once, Sam was spending more effort trying to control his own actions than he was worrying about Paul's. The pack was seated around the table at Emily and Sam's house, enjoying the cinnamon rolls that had just come out of the oven. In the kitchen, Emily glanced warily at Paul, rightfully concerned for the table. Jake, Embry, Sam said finally. That was incredibly dumb. Do I really have to forbid you from doing anything but running patrols? A week had passed since we paid the Cullens' old house a visit, and there was no indication that the Leaches had noticed anything to do with the credit cards. And to top it off, Bella continued to dodge actually speaking to us on the phone. The one time Billy had managed to talk to her, she had hung up on him. This meant we had to bring in the pack. It's an abandoned house, Embry protested. It was fine. You broke the treaty, Sam ground out. If any of them show up before your scent fades, we're screwed. We had to leave them some kind of message, I yelled. If it works and it helps Bella, then it's worth it. Sam sighed. Get out of here, Paul. Go run patrol, he ordered. Paul, whose shaking had become worse every time Embry and I opened our mouths, bolted for the door. What kind of message did you leave them? Jake Sam asked, rubbing his eyes. Two actually, I admitted. I left them a note on their door letting them know that Bella's in danger. Here I hesitated. And Sam prompted warily. Well, I figured they wouldn't be back to find the note anytime soon, but they had left some stuff for Bella, including a credit card. Embry and I tried to use that to send a message. Sam closed his eyes. So you stole from them too? It wasn't a question. Embry winced. Technically, he said hesitantly. But it wasn't much and we can pay it back after. What kind of message could you send with a credit card? Jared asked. Oh, that bit was easy, I answered. When Embry went to Seattle on Saturday, he took the card with him and he visited a few stores so that the first letters of the stores would show up on the statements spelling help. Clever, Sam said dryly. And I'm assuming they left a pin with it. Kind of. The clue was Edward's birth year. Bella would know it, of course, but we didn't. We might have been screwed there, except that Charlie's friend in Chicago had already found the birth records for Edward Mason. There were apparently a couple of them, but the most recent was born in 1901. Turns out it was the right Edward Mason. Sam groaned. I can't decide if this was good luck or bad luck. He admitted. It would definitely be easier for me if you hadn't figured all this out. But for once, the stars aligned perfectly, I finished triumphantly. I did feel bad for Sam. If the Cullens caught on to what we did, he as Alpha would have to handle the situation. But still, I couldn't be anything but happy that we'd come a step closer to keeping Bella safe. Jake, what's going on? Sam said seriously, leaning towards me. You hate the Cullens more than any of us for what they did to Bella. Why on earth are you fighting so hard to rope them into this? I do hate the Cullens, I said slowly, thinking about my words carefully. But I love Bella more. If the choice comes down to letting that redhead chase her around the country or having the Cullens go find her and bring her home, I know 100% that I'd rather have her with the Cullens. Especially since I'm sure at least one of them still cares for her, Embry cut in. Alice left things to help her. If we can reach the Cullens, at least she will help Bella. Wait, you want to bring the vampires back here? Emily asked. She was wringing a towel nervously in her hands and Sam reached out to hold both her hands in one of his. They lived here for years with no issues, Emily, he said. All will be well. Jake and Embry are sure that they'll help us find Bella and then they'll move on. We left a phone number for them, Embry said. I'm hoping we can just coordinate over the phone from where they are and then they'll be too busy running around looking for the redhead and Bella to come here. Sam nodded thoughtfully. Which phone number did you leave them? Billy's. They should already have it since they gave him a call when they were moving back to the area. Sam nodded again. Jake, make sure you let your dad know they might be calling if you haven't already, Sam instructed as he got to his feet. We don't need any. Sam's words were interrupted by a frantic howl coming from outside. We knew it well. The four of us were out the door and running in an instant, leaving Emily wringing her hands in the doorway. Paul, what's going on? Sam demanded. Leeches at the border. Two of them, Paul thought urgently. If they're waiting for us at the border, they must be Cullens, thought Embry triumphantly. Paul hadn't approached them yet, but he peered through the underbrush towards where the vampires were waiting. They were Cullens. I was surprised to find that I was slightly disappointed to note that Alice wasn't with them, although I was grateful that Edward wasn't either. Instead, it was the other two sons. Their names escaped me, but the shorter blonde one and the big, burly one were waiting at the border like statues. What are they waiting for? Sam thought. They must know by now that Jake and Embry broke the treaty and that's why they're here. Sam was right, of course. If they knew that I had broken the treaty, they would be within their right to cross the boundary. It's just them, Paul pointed out. If it was me, I wouldn't want to move aggressively, even if we were the ones to break the treaty first. Fair point, Sam conceded. I'm going to phase and step up to the river. The rest of you keep your heads cool and stay with me. I whined, but he had already phased. Sam tugged on his shorts and nodded to the rest of us, and together we stepped into view. Across the river, the two leeches finally shifted to look at us. The smaller one stepped forward. I'm Jasper and this is my brother Emmett, he said politely. Members of your pack crossed into our territory recently. You had left, which puts Forks under our protection, Sam said firmly. The blonde Jasper raised an eyebrow. Forks, not our residence. There should have been no need for you to defend there. There has been a situation, Sam admitted. We are handling it, but we may have crossed into your territory in pursuit. Jasper reached into his pocket and pulled out a post-it note. My heart leaped. I couldn't see the writing from this distance, but I was almost positive it was the note that Embry and I had left them. It worked. Paul tilted his face to glare at me. This was left on our door. Your brothers weren't simply passing by the area, were they? Just enough to place the note. Like I said. They were inside our home, Emmett cut in. We could smell them from a mile away. I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't Sam's fault and I couldn't let him take the heat for this. Making a snap decision, I turned and bolted into the woods. Sam's voice called after me, but I ignored him. Ducking around a tree, I threw on my shorts and jogged back into the clearing. It was me, I offered. Bella's in danger and we need your help to find her. When you were inside our house, did you by any chance find a folder containing some sensitive information? Jasper asked smoothly. I ground my teeth in frustration. Yes, but What did you do with it? I had no idea if the leech was being deliberately frustrating, but I saw red. Who cares about your stupid folder? Bella's in trouble? Even as a wave of calm took away the shaking in my limbs, I recognized that I may have gone too far. Jasper was just staring at me with an eyebrow raised, and I understood the message. In a contest of patience, a vampire would win. Yeah, I took it. I didn't know how quickly you would be back to check the house, and I needed to get your attention another way. So you committed identity fraud, I barked, a laugh. Says the guy that made a pile of fake documents for his brother's girlfriend. I couldn't be entirely sure at this distance, but I thought I saw a tiny smile flit across his face before he forced a neutral expression back into place. I need to be sure. It was you who opened the envelope and used the credit card, I nodded. This time I was sure of the look of relief that the two vampires shared. When Jasper spoke again, his voice was just slightly warmer. Not that I condone using another person's credit card, but I was expecting a bigger complication than this one, he admitted. That envelope could have done a lot more damage if it had fallen into other hands. I can pay you back if it helps, I offered. Don't worry about it. Now what did you need to talk to me about? This was not the reaction I had been expecting, but Jasper was right. There were more important things to talk about. Not you specifically. I was actually kind of hoping Alice would come. Alice, he and Emmett shared a look I didn't quite understand. Why did you want to talk to my wife? She's the one that wrote Bella the letter, right? I figured if any of you would be willing to help us find her, it would be her. Emmett let out a loud, booming laugh that made a flock of birds flee from a nearby tree. Look, the mutt has Alice all figured out, he said, delighted. Jasper rolled his eyes. You're right, she would. That's why I came instead. I opened my mouth, probably to yell at him again, but he cut me off. You don't need to worry though. We're aware of Bella's travels. I felt my jaw drop. You are, I whispered. He nodded. My wife is keeping an eye on her, and while she has concerns, Bella is in no danger at the moment. Despite what Edward wanted, our family would step in if she were truly in trouble. Emmett muttered something that I couldn't hear but prompted Jasper to glare at him. If that's all, then we can forgive this breach of the treaty since it was out of concern for Bella's safety, Jasper said formally, and he and Emmett turned to go. You can't be serious. A bloodthirsty vampire is hunting her across the country and all you're doing is keeping an eye on it, I growled furiously. Jake. Sam hissed a warning, but harsh words did what I wanted them to. The two vampires stilled and then turned back around. Alice hasn't seen any other vampires around Bella, Jasper said. His voice was calm but could sense the tension running underneath the words. Well, I don't know if the other vamps around her right now, I admitted. But Bella is pretty sure she's hunting her down. That's why she ran away. She didn't want anything to happen to Charlie. That does sound like something Bella would do, Jazz, Emmett said. Unlike his brother, Emmett's face was openly worried. That's something Bella has already done, Jasper said softly. Why would Bella have any reason to think another vampire was after her? She didn't say in her letter, and we haven't been able to talk to her and ask her to explain more fully, Sam cut in. But it fits based on the redhead's patterns. Before Bella left, she spent a month ducking in and out, trying to get close to Forks before leaving and coming back. After Bella left, she hung around for about a week and then we haven't seen her since. Did you say she had red hair? Jasper asked, sharing another alarmed glance with his brother. Yeah, she has a head full of curly red hair and she's pretty short. Like about here. I indicated on my chest somewhere around Bella's height. I'm gonna kill him, Emmett growled, clenching his fists. The effect on my brothers was instant. Sam and I instinctively stepped back while the ones who were phased snarled and stepped forward. Once again, an unnatural calm swept through the clearing. He wasn't talking about you, Jasper said impatiently. He's talking about Edward. Emmett's been upset with him. The redhead you're talking about, Edward, was supposed to be tracking her. Last we heard, he followed her down to South America, Emmett said angrily. If the vampire you're having issues with is Victoria, and it sounds like it's her, then Eddie screwed up big time. Is there anyone left who isn't mad at Edward? I blurted out. Emmett chuckled darkly. Not really, Jasper admitted, then his expression hardened again. If Victoria is involved, then that changes things. I wonder why Alice didn't, he trailed off, staring into the trees. Then suddenly his eyes snapped back towards us. I have to speak with my family, he said. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll take it from here. Sam nodded. Thank you for hearing us out, he started, but once again I cut him off. Maybe I had a death wish or something. Hang on, we're not done yet. We're not just passing this off to you. Jake, Sam said warningly. No, Sam. Bella's my friend. Even if the Cullens are getting involved again, I'm not just going to stop trying to find her. Jasper raised an eyebrow at me. Are you suggesting we work together to find her? No. Yes, I said firmly. She promised us that she'd call about every 3 days. Unless you know exactly where to find her, it's the best we have. Jasper stared at me for a long minute, his expression carefully neutral. Alice can see that she's somewhere down south, but we don't know exactly where she is, he said finally. I'll talk to my family and let you know. I can reach you at this phone number, he waved the post-it note. I nodded. Well, keep in touch, he promised. And this time, neither of them wasted any time in leaving. On the way home, Sam tried to chew me out for getting involved, but I barely heard him. My entire body was thrumming with relief. Surely, between the whole pack and now a coven of 7 vampires, Bella was as good as found. As promised, Jasper texted as they crossed the border into Washington state. Almost there. I'll let you know what I find. It wasn't much, but it was enough. It's almost too easy to keep this from Esme, I mused as I followed her around the garden. My nerves were frayed from the weight of the situation, but it was nothing compared to the stress I'd be feeling if I were trying to keep this from Jasper or Edward.
This time, as long as I kept my face relaxed, I could let my mind stew as much as I wanted.
I'm surprised Emmett went hunting with Jasper again, Esme said lightly, glancing at me. I thought he and Rose went 2 days ago. Oh, I think the two of them were just going to blow off some steam, I lied quickly. Guy time, you know. It wasn't an unreasonable claim.
When Edward lived at home, the 3 of them would frequently leave for a day or 2 and come back with lighter spirits and hair full of forest debris.
Esme's thoughts must have been following the same trail because she suddenly asked, Do you think Edward will ever live with us again? I glanced over at her. She was staring at the ground with her brows knit together. You know that's not something I can see, I hedged, and she shook her head. I'm not asking you as a seer, dear. I'm asking you as a sister who knows her brother like she knows her own mind. It wasn't funny, but I chuckled anyway. If I knew Edward that well, I would have been able to understand any of the insane things he's done in the past 4 months. If I knew my brother that well, Daho have known that he'd leave his soulmate, I argued. You truly had no idea he would do this. I always knew he was capable of leaving her, I clarified. I just thought he was better than that. I sighed before continuing. The Edward I thought I knew would come home. He's followed dumb ideas before, but he's always come back. Unbidden, my last vision of Edward rose into my mind. Remembering his dead black eyes, I shuddered. If he can sort out his own head, I think he'll probably be back, I finished cryptically. Despite herself, Esme chuckled. Sometimes your answers leave even more questions, she said fondly. Where did Jasper and Emmett say they were going? Out of habit, I looked into Jasper's future to check where he was. But instead of visions of him and Emmett running through the forest or walking the streets of Forks, I was met with the same horrifying blackness that had been plaguing my visions recently. I'm not sure, I admitted with forced lightness. They didn't say, although Emmett was talking about wanting to go up to Canada. Could you not tell where they were when you looked just now? Of course, she caught it. When I didn't answer, she pressed harder. Your visions have been having trouble with Forks recently. Is that where they are? Please don't worry about it, Mom, I begged. It's nothing to do with Bella. She's still down south. It's something to do with the old house. Jasper and Emmett are taking care of it. And he told you to keep it from me so I wouldn't worry. Esme laughed at the guilty expression on my face. He's such a gentleman, she said fondly. I won't worry as long as you promise to let me know if it turns into something worth worrying about. She waited for my nod before continuing. I'm surprised they left you here though. Did you not want to go to Forks yourself? More than I should. I think Jasper was worried that if he took me back then I might not leave again. My tone was light, but Esme could probably see the sincerity in my eyes. She squeezed my shoulder gently. Did Jasper say when he would call with news? I shook my head. It all depends on how long it takes for him and Emmett to find what they're looking for. We didn't have to wait too much longer for the call. Carlisle had just returned home from the hospital and had joined Esme and me in the living room when Jasper's Twanji banjo ringtone interrupted the conversation. Jazz, I answered anxiously. What's going on? Carlisle frowned at me from across the room. Oops. So much for staying casual. Well, it's better and worse than we thought. I like good news, I said, forcing calmness back into my voice. Let me just run outside quickly. Don't bother, Jazz said. As many people should hear this as possible. In other words, the bad news was really bad. In fact, it should be a family meeting if at all possible. Carlisle was already calling Rosalie downstairs. I clicked the speakerphone on. I don't know if we'll be able to get Edward on the phone, Esme said. Not Eddie, Emmett's voice growled. He doesn't get a say anymore. Well, that's ominous, said Rosalie, who had appeared in the living room. Mind telling us what's going on? The good news first, Jasper said firmly.
To catch everyone up, Emmett and I are in Forks because we had reason to believe there were items left there that, if found, would have had others identify us as vampires.
Not now, Rosalie, Carlyle muttered as she opened her mouth angrily. Let them finish. The good news is that it's not going to be a problem. The people who found what we left behind are Quaalude and therefore bound by the treaty. Obviously we would prefer that they did not find it, but it's certainly better than the alternative, Carlyle agreed. Is there any possibility that someone else found it first? I don't think so, Jasper said. It was only found because they broke into our house looking for a way to contact us. I take it you were able to speak to them, then what did they need us for? Esme gaped in horror as Jasper launched into the story. Her grip on my hand tightened as Jasper described the danger Bella was facing until I was sure she would break my fingers. So to summarize, James' mate is seeking revenge by going after Bella. But somehow Bella caught wind of it and started running. The problem is that the people who would help this generation's pack have no idea where she is and she thinks she is without help. Is that all? Carlyle was shocked and I couldn't blame him. I felt like I was about to fall over myself. Sounds about right, Emmett said at the same time as I finally spoke. I told you she was in trouble. As hard as I tried, I couldn't quite keep a note of bitterness out of my voice. It was hard not to be furious with my family, and I was immensely grateful that Jasper was far out of range of his gift. Carlyle's eyes flashed guiltily at me, but he didn't say anything. The wolves are insisting on working with us to find her. It seems like Bella and the Packer. Close. I was dying to ask Jasper what that meant, but I knew now wasn't the time. We should never have left her, Esme said firmly. It was her exposure to our world that brought her this danger, and we will help her out of it. Her declaration was met by nods around the room except for Rosalie, who rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous. Why is this even a discussion? Tell the dogs what we know so they can look for her, but why should we get ourselves involved in this? Esme and I shared a frustrated glance. No, we have to fix this. We can't just leave others to clean up our mess, Jasper pointed out. Rosalie groaned but said nothing else. She was clearly outnumbered in this. We will go back to Forks, at least temporarily, Carlyle said. That will make it easier to pick up Victoria's trail. We don't know where Bella is, but if we can find Victoria, then we can keep her safe. Emmett and I will start looking for the trail, Jasper said. Not before we open some windows at the house, Emmett said. It smells like wet dog right now. I wrinkled my nose. Who's going to phone Eddie? We traded glances around the room. I don't think we should call him yet, Carlyle said delicately. Obviously, if he's going to insist we just leave her again, it may be better for Bella if we did this subtly without either of their knowledge. You're kidding, right? Rosalie said angrily. This whole mess is his fault. He should be here to help clean it up. I'm just thinking of what's best for Bella, Carlyle said. Alice, can you see anything about this? I shook my head. No, Forks is still dark for me. I had seen Jasper decide to call me a split second before the call came through, but otherwise, I hadn't been able to see the boys all day, and the rest of us will disappear sometime tomorrow afternoon. Why can't we just hop on a plane and go straight to where Bella is? Why do we need to go to Forks at all? Rosalie asked. If you want to get on a plane and fly south, be my guest, I said through gritted teeth. But there's a lot of south and we don't know exactly where she is. Our best bet is to find Victoria first. Besides, I added privately, I want to go back to Forks. I think you're right, Jasper said. Alice, can I talk to you privately before I hang up? I pressed the button to end speakerphone and ran outside. When I was sure I was far enough away that the family wouldn't be able to hear Jasper, I brought the phone back to my ear. Jazz, I breathed. Alice, I am so sorry I didn't trust you when you tried to warn us about Bella. I smiled softly into the phone as he continued. And I'm so sorry about September. I know it's not you that I need to be apologizing to, but... Jasper, stop, I interrupted. You know no one blames you for what happened at the party. If I hadn't lost control, Bella wouldn't be on her own trying to fend off a vampire hell-bent on revenge. Or maybe our idiotic, melodramatic brother would have found something else to overreact to, I said gently. We can't say, but when she cut her finger you weren't the only one who was thirsty. I could picture Jasper scuffing his feet the way he always did when he was upset. I miss you, he said finally. I can't wait until you're here. When I returned to the house, it was almost time to leave. The other three had closed the house in record time, and all that was left for me was to pack bags for myself and Jasper. He and Emmett hadn't packed anything because they were only planning on staying for a couple of days and both knew they could use the clothes we had left behind in Forks. But if we were going to stay for any length of time, they would need more. As annoying as it is to drive so low across the continent, we agreed that we should have at least 3 cars when we got there so groups of us could leave to follow up on leads. Rosalie, who never minded the solitude, immediately left with the BMW. If you're keeping an eye on Bella, you should probably ride with one of us, Esm pointed out. Carlyle nodded thoughtfully. You should ride with Esm, Carlyle agreed. That way if you run into trouble there are two of you. Esm frowned but didn't disagree. I was already watching Bella of course, but there was nothing to see. She was just driving.
But now that I had at least part of the story from Jasper, I could see the parts of the visions I had been missing.
Part of my ability was the ability to search for the result of decisions, but far less controllable were the visions that came to me whenever I needed to see something. Until now, I was worried that my spontaneous visions of Bella were merely showing me a slow decline when in fact they were trying to reveal something much more sinister. I could see the way the light disappeared in the deep shadows under her glassy eyes. The way she gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled fists. The way she nearly jumped out of her seat when a car honked beside her. The hypervigilance in her eyes when she scanned the mirrors far too often for a regular human sitting in traffic. There were so many little signs that even I had not recognized the significance of before this. She was exhausted and terrified and she needed us. Oh Bella, what have we done? Would you please sit down, Jake, Embry begged. He was stretched across the couch while I paced frantically across the room. How can I when you're taking up the whole couch, I shot back. Besides, I'm gonna go nuts if I can't do something. Embry and I had been sitting in my living room for the past 2 hours waiting for Jasper's call. I had no idea what talk to the family entailed, but short of the leeches running to wherever they lived now and back, 2 hours should have been more than plenty. What if he was just telling me what I wanted to hear and they're not actually going to work with me on the search, I fretted. Embry shrugged. Then we'll still look ourselves. Sure, it won't be as efficient, but Bella will still be found, even if the bloodsuckers don't want to work with us. And you do think they'll actually help? For sure, Embry nodded. Jasper did a pretty good job of hiding what he was thinking, but Emmett sucked at it. They had no idea the redhead was after Bella, and when they left they were definitely on a mission. Right, that's the most important thing. Finally, I kicked Embry's feet off the couch and went to sit down. I had no sooner relaxed into my seat when the phone rang. We both leaped up and dashed for the phone, but Embry was closer. Black's House of Angst, Embry speaking. He howled with laughter as I ripped the phone out of his hands. This is Jacob. Sorry, my friend is an idiot. It's not a problem, Jasper's voice said smoothly on the other end of the line. Emmett finds those kind of antics amusing as well. Is it safe to talk? Safe. I wondered before it clicked. He wanted to know if there was anyone nearby who wasn't part of the treaty. Yeah, Embry's part of the pack too. He was the one with gray fur and dark spots. Good. First thing, I wanted to thank you for bringing Bella's situation to our attention. I'm sure you know by now, but Bella means a lot to our family.
If she was that important to you guys, you wouldn't have just left her to be hunted, I snapped.
It's not my place to say why we left, Jasper said after a long pause. Rest assured we had our reasons. Edward had been tracking Victoria down south. We didn't expect her to give him the slip and return here. You should have, I said bluntly. She's hella slippery. So did you talk to your family? I did, and we've decided to return to Forks temporarily. It will be easier to find Victoria's trail and to work together to find Bella if we're nearby. At least to start. Sam won't be happy about that. He doesn't particularly want to work with us, does he? Jasper asked. Not really, I admitted. Most of the pack is more interested in protecting our land than finding Bella. It's mostly just me and Embry, but we were friends with her before we knew about the wolf thing. In that case, would the two of you be interested in joining us tomorrow morning at the border where we spoke earlier? My family will have arrived by then and we need to share information. I can't speak for any of the others, but I will be there. When you say family, do you mean all of them? Most of them, Jasper said. We've decided to keep this situation from Edward for the time being. Why? He promised her he would stay out of her life, he said. Which brings me to a favor I'd like to ask you. I don't usually offer favors to leeches, I pointed out. He chuckled. Consider it a favor for Bella then, he said. You two are close, right? Yeah, I said, wondering where the heck this could be going.
When we finally figure out where she is, we need you to be the one to retrieve her and explain why she's safer in Forks.
Yeah, I would have wanted to do that anyway. But why? Edward actually made all of us promise to leave her alone. We will help you find her and deal with Victoria, but once she's safe, it would be best if we were to leave her unaware of our involvement. I nodded slowly. That makes sense. Sam won't be thrilled, but he'll deal with it. Embry raised an eyebrow and I mouthed later at him. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 then, Jasper said briskly. There was a click and a dial tone. I slowly hung the phone back on the wall and turned to face Embry. The Cullens don't want Bella knowing they're involved, I said slowly. They want me to take all the credit for it. Embry whistled. That's good though, isn't it? They certainly won't stick around for longer than they have to, and you won't have to worry about Bella falling back into his arms again. It's good for me, at least. And I was thinking about it, and Sam left a loophole open when he gave the order. He told me I couldn't go looking for Bella.
But if the Cullens do the looking and then just tell me where to go, then I should be home free. I couldn't keep the touch of pride out of my voice.
Embry gave an incredulous laugh. You're amazing, Jake. I guess you've got it all worked out then. Sam appeared to be in a reasonably good mood when I got to their house. He and Emily weren't alone, and although I didn't look forward to trying to explain the phone call to Sam with only Paul there, I was immensely grateful that I hadn't accidentally interrupted his and Emily's alone time. When I arrived, Sam was installing shelves and Emily was cooking an endless task with this pack. I bit back a laugh when I saw Paul standing at the sink scrubbing dishes under Emily's watchful eye. Apparently a few weeks ago, in an effort to limit the pack's comings and goings to just meal times, Emily had declared that any wolf just lounging around the house would do dishes. It seemed that the decree was still in effect. Jasper called the house a few minutes ago, I said by way of greeting. The rest of them are coming back to Forks temporarily. Sam sighed and put down his drill. Bella's not even here, he said wearily. No, but this is the last place she was. Plus, the redhead has been here recently too. The Cullens aren't just looking for Bella. You gotta be kidding me, grumbled Paul. The redhead is totally ours. She's not if she's left the peninsula, Sam said calmly. But they don't need to all come back just to pick up a trail. Well, that's not exactly all, I admitted. They also want to meet with us to coordinate the search. No way. Vol burst out. 5 of us and 7 of them, that's suicide. We're working together, not waging war. I rolled my eyes. I don't like it either, Sam said. We did technically break the treaty after all. If we're getting technical, I broke it over a year ago by telling Bella stories about the cold ones, I shot back. They could have retaliated then, but they didn't. Sam raised his eyebrows. Wait, you're the one who told her? I just assumed the Cullens did. Although it doesn't surprise me that they chose not to go after a kid who was just telling ghost stories. But 2 members of the pack breaking into their house knowing fully what they're doing is a way different story. I shrugged. Either way, if they wanted to get back at us for breaking the treaty, they didn't have to call a whole meeting about it. They sure did if they wanted to wait for backup to arrive, he shot back. I sighed in frustration.
Okay, what if I went by myself? I'm the one who broke into their house anyway, so if they really did want payback, it's just on me. Maybe Embry could stay phased in the tree line, so if they do attack, you guys can have a heads up to get back to La Push and set up defense.
It was obvious that Sam still didn't love the idea of nearly half the pack within easy access of the Cullens, but he knew it was our best option. So far, ordering me not to help in the search for Bella was a line he seemed to not want to cross. Finally, after several minutes of thought, Sam nodded. Fine, go let Embry know the plan and then go get some sleep. You 2 can take patrol at 10 tonight and then meet the Cullens when you finish in the morning. His decision was made and he picked up his drill again. One more thing. Sam paused to look at me. The Cullens don't want to be around Bella. They'll help us locate her and they'll help us deal with the redhead, but they want one of us to physically interact with Bella so she doesn't know they're involved. Sam's eyebrows rose in surprise. Well, that's big of them, he admitted. After what they did to Bella, leaving her alone is the right thing to do. They do seem to care about her, even if they're bloodsuckers and can't possibly treat her the way she deserves. Well, that's an uncomfortable thought, Emily said dryly. It's much easier to just believe that vampires are all bad. The 3 of us could not agree more. In some ways, pulling into the driveway of our Forks home felt like my return to Ithaca just 2 weeks ago. Jasper was waiting for me on the porch and he flew over to greet me when we stopped. But in Ithaca it was my return to Jasper that felt like coming home. Now I breathed in the pine-scented air and felt a peace like I haven't felt for months seep into my bones. Esme sighed happily when she stepped out of the car. For all that this house had some bad memories, there were hundreds of good ones. Here was where we met Bella and where we let her fill a hole in our family that we hadn't even known existed. Ever the gentleman, Jasper retrieved both Esme's and my luggage from the trunk. The huge front windows were already open and I could see Carlisle, Emmett, and Rosalie already inside waiting for us. The inside of the house was exactly the same as when we left it, except for a stale wet dog scent that I didn't remember from opening any other house. Jasper saw my nose wrinkle and flashed me a sympathetic grin. It's the Twilight pack, he explained. Emmett recognized their scent from when the rest of the family signed the treaty. I opened the windows, but there's still some of the smell left. And they touched absolutely everything, Rosalie complained as she entered the room. They certainly were thorough in their search, Jasper agreed. We can't be mad at them for that though, Esm said sharply. Not if that's the reason we were able to find out about Bella. Rosalie huffed and stomped out of the room, and Esm and I shared an exasperated glance. I couldn't help but be grateful that neither of us had to share a car with her on the way up. So what's the battle plan, Major? I asked lightly, turning to Jasper. Emmett and I spent the night looking for a trail for Victoria, but we came up with nothing. She's been gone for a while. Unfortunately, our best bet is just to head south and start looking there. I nodded and reached out with my gift again. Bella was rummaging through piles of clothes, muttering something about being sure she had it somewhere. Unfortunately, it was early and the windows were still covered, so there was no seeing any of the outside. I shook my head at Jasper. Before we go, we'll be meeting with at least one representative from the pack in a few minutes. We should start running, he said. I still don't really understand why we're going to be working this closely with the pack, Esm admitted as the group left the house. Thanks to our hearing and our lack of need for oxygen, it was relatively easy to continue the conversation while running to the border. 5 of us ran as closely together as we could given the trees, while Rosalie trailed in the back, her sour mood still disallowing her from joining in fully. The Quileutes are our only contact with Bella. So far Alice hasn't had much luck figuring out where Bella is through her visions. Unless that changed in the car. I shook my head. I had spent the entire drive searching not only Bella's and Victoria's futures, but the only thing that I've been able to see was that Bella was still in the south and on the move again, and Victoria was just waiting in a place that didn't look anything like where Bella was. Hopefully the meeting with the wolves would put some of those clues together into something useful. I do wish Edward were with us. Not because I don't think he's caused enough trouble around here, Jasper said hurriedly as I opened my mouth to retort. Just that it would be helpful to know what the wolves were thinking while we talked to them. I don't think they'll intentionally hide things from us, but they might think that certain things are too insignificant to mention. Jacob seems eager enough to help us that he isn't too self-conscious about bringing things up though, Emmett pointed out. Jasper nodded. His love for Bella is our biggest advantage right now. Love, Esm questioned uneasily. Yes, love. Jasper sighed and glanced at our family running around us. Look, I wouldn't say anything if it weren't so obvious anyway, but Jacob Black is very much in love with Bella. I don't know what their relationship was when she left, but I am confident that if she were here right now, he would be pursuing her romantically. Oh Edward, Esm whispered softly. Don't oh Edward him, I said hotly. This is exactly what he asked for, right, for Bella to have a normal human relationship. I don't think dating a wolf pup was exactly Edward's idea of normal human relationship, Emmett chuckled. Although we've been gone 4 months and she's already got trouble following her. Maybe having a shifter for a boyfriend is her best option after all. I'm not sure about that, Carlyle said heavily. After we signed the treaty, Edward explained what was inside their minds. It sounded like half their time was spent fighting to control their own tempers. I have no doubt that Jacob loves her, but even love wouldn't be enough to prevent him from losing control around her. Great, so she's right back in the situation we tried to prevent by leaving. I threw up my hands. Even so, we're silent partners here, Carlyle said firmly. Unless Edward decides he wants to return to Bella, we have to keep her unaware of our involvement. Esm opened her mouth to protest and his eyes softened. I know it will be hard for some of us to have her so close, yet be unable to interact with her, he said gently. But we must. It would do her more harm than good to be reunited with us, only for us to leave again once she is safe from Victoria. We can continue this later, but the Quileutes are already here, Jasper called out. I didn't need Jasper's warning. A brief gust of wind brought us the same scent that covered our house, but so potent it would have made me gag as a human. Jasper was right, there was more than one scent, but when we broke through the tree line, only one boy was waiting for us on the opposite bank of the river. The boy was heavily tanned and slightly larger than Emmett. His appearance made him look like a grown man, but his shoulders hunched and he fidgeted like a teenager who hadn't yet gained the confidence to match. As we approached the river, our family fell into the standard formation. Carlyle was at the front with Jasper on his right and Emmett on his left. The rest of us fell in behind them. This time the display of force was habitual but unneeded. Even if the werewolf was our enemy, our numbers compared to the lone wolf would have been intimidating enough. Jacob Black called Jasper. Are you here alone? We all knew he wasn't, that there was at least one other wolf in the vicinity, but this was a good way to test how forthcoming with his own information or unlikely I would be. It's myself and Embry here. He's hanging out in the forest as a wolf so the others can see what's happening. Well, that answered it. We heard a whine coming from the forest to the west. Apparently, Embry was less inclined to reveal his presence than Jacob had been. I gave my family the brief overview you told me last time we met. Would you mind clarifying how Bella knew Victoria was after her? There was another Lee vampire hanging around town. Bella ran into him while hiking and they seemed to know each other, so we didn't get involved right away. He told her that Victoria was looking for her. I wrinkled my nose. Bella was hiking. The Bella we left here wouldn't have been caught dead marching around a remote forest. Part of me wondered if Jacob was being all the way truthful here. I reached forward and tapped Jasper's elbow twice.
It was the family code any of us could ask of both him and Edward, is what was said just now the truth. Jasper immediately reached up to scratch his nose.
It is. What did this other vampire look like? Carlisle asked. Dark-skinned with dreadlocks. He had a bit of a French accent. Do you know him? Carlisle nodded. He was visiting our cousins up north while he gave our diet a try. Jacob barked a laugh. I'm afraid you'll have to tell your cousins that he fell off the wagon.
Despite his eye collar, we gave him the benefit of the doubt, but once he told Bella he was going to use her as a snack, we killed him.
And we're so glad you did, Carlisle said firmly. Jacob seemed slightly surprised at the sentiment but said nothing else on the subject. The rest of the meeting was spent talking about things we could do to try and find Bella. I talked about my visions and we came up with a list of places to go and try to pick up her scent. We decided that Jacob should stay in Washington until we found her for a few reasons. The first reason was simply practicality. Not only would Jacob be a slower traveler due to needing to stop for food and sleep, but we also discovered quickly that the presence of the shifters was the reason behind the holes in my vision. But that doesn't explain why I couldn't see the Denali the other week, I pointed out. Actually, it might, Jake admitted. There was a half-hour period about a week and a half ago where I decided to run to Alaska to find your cousins and see if they knew how to get a hold of you. Oh. I blinked owlishly. How did you know our cousins were in Alaska? Edward mentioned it to Charlie, who mentioned it to my dad in front of me. I think Charlie almost has half a mind to go up there himself, by the way. He's getting pretty desperate to find her too. Poor Charlie, I said sadly. Jacob's eyes on me grew more intense for a brief moment and then bounced back to Jasper, who had begun talking. There was something odd going on in this conversation. Jacob was paying close attention to Jasper and Carlisle and doing plenty of explaining himself, but every 30 seconds he would look at me with an inscrutable expression in his eyes. It was honestly starting to weird me out a little bit. So if Bella is due to call again tomorrow, well, leave in the morning. If she tells you where she is, well, go to her and watch over her until you arrive. Once you've brought her safely back to Forks, we can focus on eliminating the threat. Shouldn't you leave now? Jacob asked. What if Victoria is already there? Obviously I can't be sure, I said. I can't see Victoria well, but the landscape around Victoria and the landscape around Bella seem to be very different. And now that I'm watching, I should be able to see any decision that brings her close to Bella. Well then, let's hope she talks to us this time then. Jacob stifled a yawn and Asm frowned. Did we start too early for you, Jacob, she said, speaking for the first time since we arrived. No, Jacob said, his face coloring slightly. I was on patrol last night, so I just haven't slept yet. I was going to grab a quick nap between our meeting and the next patrol. So you haven't slept since yesterday morning, Asm fretted. She turned to Carlisle. We can be done here, can't we? Carlisle nodded. I think so. We'll call you at Billy's if we find anything important on our end. Do you have a number to reach us at? Jacob nodded. Jasper gave me his number on the phone when he let me know to meet you here. But before you go, I'd like to talk to Alice real quick. I could feel the rest of the family's eyes on me, but I didn't look around. Instead, I kept my gaze on Jacob. He was looking at me properly now. The careful, furtive glances from earlier. Now he was watching, waiting for my reaction. As I stepped forward, Jasper grabbed my wrist. When I glanced up at him, his eyes were wary. As much as he was grateful to Jacob for helping us find Bella, he still didn't trust him with me. It'll be fine, Jazz, I whispered. You can't know that. I looked back at Jacob. He seemed tense but not angry. Do you sense anything from him? When he didn't respond, I addressed Jacob. Are you comfortable if I come over? Yeah, he said, stepping back to give me room to jump over the river. I didn't notice Jacob flinch slightly as I landed. This is so weird, he muttered. Look, I just wanted to say thanks. I know we're natural enemies and all that, but I saw what you left for her. Even if she never knew about it, thanks for trying to help her. Then and now. You don't need to thank us. We're just undoing our own mistakes here. Jacob frowned. What mistakes? Do you know why Victoria is after her? Not really, but I'm guessing it has something to do with her injury in Phoenix last year, I nodded. The vampire that was after her was Victoria's mate. We killed him and we think she's trying to go after Bella for revenge. We had originally left because we thought she would be safer if she wasn't being exposed to other vampires anymore. Jasper mentioned that Edward, he growled out my brother's name. Was supposed to have been tracking her down. Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but after all this is over, he'll definitely be answering some questions. Jacob looked down at the ground and bit his lip. It was such a Bella-like gesture that I couldn't help but smile. He was clearly trying to work himself up to asking a question and I didn't push him. Did Edward tell you what happened the day he left her? I don't see how that's any of your business, I snapped, anger sharpening my tone. Your brother made it my business when he told her he didn't love her anymore and ran off, leaving me to try to put her back together. He left her in the middle of the forest, damn it. My heart turned to ice. That can't be right. He wouldn't leave her in the middle of the forest, I whispered, horror-struck. I heard several thuds behind me as my family landed on our side of the riverbank, apparently giving up the pretense of privacy. I glanced behind me and took in the expressions of shock and horror on their faces. And fury. Rosalie's fury. During the first part of the meeting, Rosalie had held herself with aloofness. It was no secret that she didn't particularly care about Bella. She was only here because Emmett asked her to be. But now her fists were balled at her sides and her expression was thunderous. I didn't have to be an empath to feel the rage radiating out of every pore. But her glare was directed at the ground, so I couldn't tell who her ire was with. Well, he did, Jacob said roughly. It was already past midnight when Sam found her collapsed on the ground and freezing. The doctor said she'd probably been out there for several hours. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Jasper scratch his nose. Esm's face fell. So whatever had really happened out there, at least Jacob firmly believed it to be the truth. That makes no sense, Carlyle said, stepping up beside me. Edward called and told me about the conversation with her, and he said that while she disagreed vehemently with our plan, she understood why we had to leave. Then he was lying, Jacob said bluntly. Whatever he told Bells convinced her that he no longer loved her and it broke her. She barely ate or spoke to anyone for weeks after. If she slept, she woke up screaming from nightmares. She only snapped out of it because Charlie threatened to send her to a psychiatric hospital in Florida. Psychiatric hospital. Insane asylum. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Our leaving had caused my sweet human sister to come apart so thoroughly that she had very nearly been sentenced to the same fate that ended my human life. It's not the same, a small voice whispered in my mind. Of course it wasn't. Treatments have come a long way since I had been committed for my fledgling gift. She likely wouldn't have been kept isolated in a dirty cell with barely enough food to keep her alive. But still, the parallels between Bella's almost story and my newly discovered history were enough to turn my stomach. Is she okay? I heard Jacob ask as a soothing calm started to pick at the edges of my horror. She's fine. I think this was probably just a shock. We'd better go now, but we'll keep in touch. We did this to her, Jasper, I said softly. He rubbed my shoulders soothingly. I know, darling, but we'll fix this. How if we can't talk to her? There's no way we can properly apologize. We can protect her for the rest of her life and make sure she wants for nothing, but without the words from us, she'll never be able to recognize it as our attempts to make it right. We'll cross the bridge when we find her, Carlyle said firmly. I nodded out of habit, but something had changed inside me. Now that I had a better picture of what Bella was going through, there was no going back. Carlyle wanted to support Edward the way Edward had been the first one to come alongside him, and Jasper was afraid of hurting Bella again. But I didn't care anymore. When we found Bella, I would do the right thing. I just wasn't sure if I was ready to tell the rest of the family yet. Not when they had finally agreed to help me find her. Are you okay, Rose? I heard Emmett say softly as we began the run back to the house. Of course I'm not okay. Edward was doing a good thing by letting Bella have a normal human life, but if he lied to her and left her in the forest, then he's really just another son of a bitch who took away a woman's choice and left her today. That's a bit harsh, Rose. It's really not, Emmett. Even if his intentions were good, the effect was the same. Except instead of being physically brutalized, Bella was emotionally tortured. It's the curse of this family's women. Ahead of us, Carlyle swung Esmond to his arms so he was carrying her, and Jasper's hand tightened around mine. Over Carlyle's shoulder, Esme met my eyes, and I couldn't help the soft smile that spread across my face in response to hers. It seemed like Rosalie had drawn parallels of her own. Despite the nightmare that was unfolding around us, something magical had happened. Whether she realized it or not, Rosalie had included Bella as family. The nap I took after meeting up with the Cullens was the best thing Daho ever had. I felt like I could have slept for another 8 hours, but all too soon, the alarm's persistent beeping invaded my dreams. I didn't have patrol until much later, but I still had things to do. Earlier that morning I had come home to find a note from Billy asking me to pick him up at Charlie's again. And before that, I had errands of my own to run. I fingered the thick manila envelope sitting on the table. I hand brought it to the meeting earlier because I still wasn't 100% sure about the tentative alliance. But I was now. Since I had to pick up Billy afterward, I decided to take the rabbit out instead of running. As I opened the door of the garage, my gaze settled on the motorcycles huddled forlornly in the corner. Like every time I entered the garage recently, I reached out and brushed the handlebars of Bella's bike gently. Would we ever get a chance to ride our bikes together again? It was never very far from my mind that I was putting so much effort into bringing her home and making sure she was safe. It was the only thing I could do. But even so, her friendship was no longer a guarantee.
After all this, I still wasn't sure if she would even want to hang out with a wolf, much less one who had ditched her for so long after promising not to.
As I pulled into the Cullens' driveway, I was slightly surprised to find that it still looked the same as when Embry and I had broken in. The grass was still long and meadow-like and there was no evidence of any movement inside the windows. In fact, the only change was the sun that was now highlighting the wildflowers dotting the grass. I wasn't sure what my plan was if no one was home. I knew they had planned on staying out of town, so it never occurred to me that they would be anywhere else but at home. I certainly couldn't break into the house again and I didn't want to just leave their envelope on the front porch. I didn't need to worry. As I walked up the front steps, the door opened and Emmett beckoned me inside. Alice was pretty sure it was you, he said by way of greeting. But it's sunny outside right now, so we had to be sure. With that, he ducked back into the house, leaving the door ajar. After a moment's hesitation, I followed him inside. The smell hit me like a sledgehammer. It was one thing to meet with them outside or to go into a house that they left months ago. But I didn't realize just how much rubbing shoulders with them inside would stink. Even so, under the stench of vampire that made my eyes water, there was another smell that made my mouth water too. Are those cookies? I asked, cautiously sniffing the air. A flurry of giggles sounded in the kitchen and Alice appeared in the doorway. Asm stress bakes, she explained. And there hasn't really been anyone to eat her creations since Bella. Asm smiled warmly as I followed Alice back into the kitchen. She was the vision of a Norman Rockwell painting apron and all pulling a tray of cookies out of the oven. The fact that it was a vampire engaging in this display of domesticity made for a very strange picture. I hope you're hungry, she said kindly, placing a few onto a plate and sliding it across the counter towards me. I picked one up and popped it in my mouth. It was delicious. Thanks, these are really good, I said, my voice muffled by the cookie. Asm beamed at me and started placing the rest of the cookies from the tray into a paper bag. Here, you can take these ones to your brothers. I wasn't entirely sure that any of them but Embry would want cookies homemade by a leech, but I decided not to tell her that. Who let the mutt in here? Rosalie glared at me as she passed through the kitchen. We just finished tearing the place out from your last visit. Hey princess, how long does it take a blonde to change the light bulb? Oh, a blonde joke, how original, Rosalie sneered. I guess with such a tiny brain you can't think of anything else. She flipped her hair over her shoulder and stalked out of the kitchen. I tried not to snicker. She doesn't mean it, you know, Asm said anxiously. This time I couldn't help but laugh. Sure she does, but that's alright. I can take it. I turned back to Alice. So you knew I was coming? Sort of, Alice said. We knew that one of the pack was coming, but I couldn't see who. I did hope it was you though. Makes sense. I just wanted to drop this off, I said, tossing the envelope onto the counter. Alice put her hand on it and stared at it thoughtfully. I swear I didn't know this would happen to her, she said abruptly after a moment's pause. My gift is clearest after a decision is made, but I still sometimes get feelings about things. Like I could sense that she would need these, even though I had no idea how or why. She looked up at me then, her gold eyes anxious. I had no idea what she would go through or else I never would have left. She looked so sad that my heart went out to her. I just don't understand how you didn't see her decide to leave. Alice shrugged. My gift isn't perfect. I wasn't actively looking for her at the time, so there are a number of things that could have hidden the decision from me. A member of your pack could have been close by when she made the decision. Or maybe I did see her deciding to leave, but because she didn't have a plan, all I saw was her driving. I don't see the reasons behind the decisions, just the outcomes. This is what I've been trying to tell my family for months. Just because I don't see something doesn't mean it's not happening. There are too many variables. The ability to see the future sounded incredible, but I had never before considered how muddled it might make things. But I was so quick to point out the harder parts of being able to turn into giant wolves, it made sense that it might be the same way for the vampires too. At this moment, Alice looked positively miserable with her gift. I'm sorry, Alice, I said sincerely. It's not your fault we can't find her. She flashed a shaky smile at me. That's very kind of you to say, Jacob, she said. Speaking of the holes in my vision, are you by any chance going to see Charlie next? Yeah, my dad is there now and I need to pick him up. She nodded. I'm getting better at this, she said to herself before continuing in a normal voice. I was wondering if I could tag along. Why would you want to do that? I asked. The thought of making the 10-minute drive into town with a vampire sitting in the seat next to me made my nose twitch. I want to see Charlie, she admitted. When Bella and I became friends, we hung out at her house a lot and Charlie was so kind to me. I know he's struggling with Bella's disappearance and I wanted to see if I could cheer him up at all. Then why not take yourself? I'm afraid he's not going to be very happy to see me at first. I was hoping that arriving with you would smooth over the meeting. I rolled my eyes. I thought you were trying to stay under the radar here, I pointed out. For the most part, we are. But it wouldn't be that suspicious of me to spend my spring break coming back to visit my best friend. Besides, she lowered her voice conspiratorially. My family is so guilty about not listening to me when I told them Bella was in trouble that no one wants to tell me no. So how are you going to divide up the groups to look for Bella? I asked once we were settled in the car. The sun had disappeared behind the clouds again, so we had all the windows rolled down to keep the smell from getting too bad. I knew she would still be able to hear me. We'll be traveling in groups of 3. It actually works out very well. Among the 6 of us, there are 2 who have medical training, 2 above average fighters, and 2 who Bella is most comfortable with. She grinned at me. Do you want to guess who's who? Obviously Bella is very comfortable with you. And Esme. Alice nodded. That was the easy one. Esme seemed to be the type of motherly person who could make anyone feel comfortable. Emmett is one of the fighters. Maybe Rosalie too, she seems like she could be a good fighter if she gets pissed off anyway. Alice laughed. You're not wrong, but Jasper actually has more combat experience than the rest of us, so he and Emmett are the fighters. Is that so? I figured with all those scars he wasn't that good. I grinned at her to show that I was joking and she chuckled. Vampires usually fight to the death. So just the fact that he has that many scars and he's still alive means that he's very very good. I guess that makes sense. Wait, so that means that Rosalie is the other doctor? Somehow I couldn't picture the imposing blonde with a seemingly permanent scowl on her face being allowed anywhere near a patient. Alice giggled. Not exactly. Rosalie and Edward are the only ones other than Carlisle to have gone through medical school. Rosalie's never practiced as a doctor, but if Bella is injured when we find her, then theoretical knowledge is better than nothing. I thought Jasper said you guys wouldn't let her know you were there. That would be ideal. At least according to Edward. But if Victoria shows up while we're waiting for you, we certainly won't just stand back and watch.
And you'll want to split up your gifts, right? So you in one car and Jasper in the other, Alice shrugged.
Thanks to modern technology, my gift is just as useful to both cars no matter where I'm riding. Rosalie will probably ride with Emmett and Esme because she tends to be nicer to them and it was a challenge to convince her to come in the first place. Carlisle and I, along with Jasper, will take the other car. I nodded thoughtfully. The Cullens had obviously put a great deal of thought into this. I was glad to see that they were taking this rescue mission just as seriously as I was. I realized with a start that while I was talking with Alice, I had unconsciously driven most of the familiar route to the Swan residence. Maybe it was just that we had someone important in common, but I found Alice surprisingly easy to talk to. If life were different, if she had never been turned or I had never phased, I was beginning to think that we could have been good friends. But reality settled back in as I pulled into the driveway and spotted Billy through the living room windows. We weren't friends. Instead, I was about to bring a mortal enemy into the same house as my dad. Don't worry, I'll keep my distance from him, Alice murmured, as if she could read my mind. Take him and leave. I'm just here for Charlie. I nodded my thanks and taking a big breath to steel myself, I pushed open the Swan's front door. Jake, what is this? Billy Black hissed as I followed Jacob into the living room. This is Alice Cullen, one of Bella's friends. I ran into her at the store and offered her a ride. Billy Black was red-faced and wild-eyed. It could not be more obvious that he did not want me anywhere near. Thankfully, it wasn't his decision. I stepped towards Charlie. Hey Charlie, I was in town visiting friends for spring break. Jacob told me what happened to Bella. I'm so sorry. Charlie was pale-faced and slack-jawed. He looked like had seen a ghost. I suppose for all intents and purposes he had. Finally, he seemed to recover himself. It's good to see you, Alice, he said. I'm sorry Bella isn't here. She would have loved to see you too. Jacob mentioned that you think she might be trying to find my family, I said gently. I've already called Mom so they can keep an eye out. And shall call our cousins in Alaska in case Bella tries there. Both Jacob and I knew Bella was nowhere near Alaska, but I couldn't help but remember that Charlie had been thinking of heading up north himself. You called her Mom. Charlie lifted his head up and looked at me with tear-filled eyes. You used to call her Esme. I'm sure she loves that. His eyes returned to the table. I'm not dumb, I know Bella calls me Charlie behind my back. Do you think maybe? If she and I were closer. Charlie, no. I cried, crossing the room to wrap my arms around his shoulders. At the other side of the table, Billy hissed softly and rolled backward. Don't say that. Bella loves you so much. I'm sure that whatever drove her to leave you were the thing that made her consider staying. She's right, Charlie. Billy looked miffed to be agreeing with me. Charlie wiped his eyes and tried to smile, first at Billy then at me. You can let Asm know that she's not headed to Alaska. She's in Texas. Jacob and I glanced at each other quickly. Texas, Jacob asked eagerly. Charlie chuckled. If you can believe it, kid, that's where Leah ended up. She sent Bella an email with an address this morning. Apparently, Bella has been checking her emails after all. With the way she has been ignoring them up till now, I figured she wouldn't have been, Charlie grumbled. Sounds like she and Bella talked on the phone at some point too. I didn't even know she and Leah were close enough to be talking on the phone. Charlie suddenly fixed Jacob with a hard stare. Did she call you too, son? Leaving Jacob to handle Charlie's interrogation, I surreptitiously pulled out my phone and sent a text to Jasper. There's an email from Leah Clearwater in Bella's inbox. It has an address in Texas where Charlie thinks they'll be meeting. The reply came almost immediately. Hey, Jasper never took very long to respond, and for that, I was exceptionally grateful. Jasper would already be hacking into Bella's emails and would have the information soon. Jacob was watching me when I looked up. I gave him a subtle nod. Hey, I'm so sorry to cut this visit short, Charlie. Apparently, Jasper is having car trouble. He was going to pick me up here, but I don't think he'll be able to. Jake, could I beg you for a ride back? Do you mind, Dad? Jacob's eyes bored into Billy's. Billy swallowed nervously, his eyes flickering from me to his son. Finally, he nodded. No problem, Jake, I'll just hang out here a little longer. Swing by and pick me up when you're coming back through town. Charlie surprised me by reaching out to hug me again like his daughter. Charlie had never been one to initiate physical contact, and I kissed him on the cheek. It was good to see you, Chief. Are you going to go after Bella? No. He grinned at my surprised expression. I know last time Bella went off on her own, it didn't end well. But I feel better now that Lee's with her. She's a bit older than Bella and has a good head on her shoulders. Maybe Leah will be able to convince her to come home, and then you'll have to come back to visit again. Of course I will, Charlie. You lied to Charlie, Jacob accused as soon as we got back into the car. Well, what was I supposed to say? I asked, exasperated. Sorry, Charlie, I'm only here because Bella's missing and it's my family's fault. After we fix this, you'll never see me again. Really, Jacob, I was still quite sure of my plan to talk to Bella when we found her. Even if it was to leave her in a better way than we did before. After that, I had no idea. It would be up to Bella. I just hate lying, Jacob said sorely. When all this is over, I'm going to find a way to tell Bella everything. Screw the Alpha Order. His declaration brought up something else Daho'd been thinking about for the last few days. When Carlisle told me about their first encounter with your tribe, he mentioned that the Alpha of the pack was your ancestor. I'm curious, what decides who a pack's Alpha is? Jacob's face darkened, but he kept his eyes trained on the road. It's by birthright, so technically I should be Alpha now. He trailed off. I could sense he wasn't finished, so I waited with little patience. It was rare that I could know what someone was going to say before they said it, and I had little practice waiting. I didn't want to be Alpha, he finished. Why not? I was angry when I phased. My whole life trajectory changed, and I effectively lost my best friend and the girl I was hoping to date. I didn't want to be any more involved in this life than I had to be. Believe it or not, I can understand it. It wasn't my experience coming into this life, but it was some of my family's. Suddenly I had the mental image of Jacob and Rosalie sitting on her bed painting their toenails and sharing their grievances about their supernatural lives. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to hold back a wholly inappropriate giggle. Honestly, there have been some situations that would have been easier if I was the Alpha though. Why not become the Alpha now? I'm not sure if it works like that. Besides, I don't really want to do it. It would just make it easier to find Bella if I was the one making up the rules. I flashed him a sympathetic smile, but he gave no indication that he had seen it. You're a strong person, Jake. You'll make the right choice.
Now, I sent Jasper looking for the email Charlie told us about, I said, changing the subject.
By the time we get back to the house, I'll have made a solid plan. I suspect we'll be leaving for Texas right away. If we know where she is, why don't I just come now? We still don't know whether she's staying at the address for a bit or whether she's just picking up Leah and they'll head off together, I explained. Unless you want to follow all of us around the south looking for her, it makes sense for us to have eyes on her first. Jacob pulled to a stop in front of the house. I could hear my family inside, making preparations for our trip. Should I? Jacob gestured towards the house. I chuckled. Of course. Why do you think I asked you to give me a ride back? We're in this together, partner. I mimicked Jasper's southern drawl and was rewarded with a small chuckle. We both got out of the car and headed up the stairs. All right, talk to us, Jazz, I said as I opened the front door. Charlie's right. The address is for a motel in San Antonio. Bella replied by the time we got into her emails, and she should be arriving soon. I couldn't stop the grin from spreading across my face. I could have kissed Charlie. This was it. We found her. With any luck by tomorrow night, she would be safe under our protection. Jasper monitored my jubilation with a huge smile on his face. Who's going to get her? Jacob asked. Everyone, Jasper said. Texas is a little more complicated. Southern Covens can be very territorial, and Jasper has history there, Carlisle explained, coming up behind Jasper. It's safer for all of us if we stick closer together. Jacob nodded. It's a good thing you're not planning on actually interacting with Bella if she's met up with Leah, he said. Leah can be a bit of a handful. Oh, I think we can handle her, Emmett announced his presence with a booming laugh. We've all had enough practice with Rose. He ducked out of the way as his wife's hand came flying towards his head. I'll just head home then, Jacob said awkwardly. It was clear that he didn't feel very comfortable with so many boisterous vampires funneling into the entryway. You'll give me a call when you want me to join you. Oh, wait just a minute, I said quickly. Spinning on my toes, I dashed upstairs into Jasper's study. In addition to containing all of Jasper's research, Jasper's office also served as a sort of base of operations. All the equipment that made our frequent identity changes easier, specialty printers, backup identities, information backups that could be incriminating were stored in here. Rummaging around in the closet, I finally found the box I was looking at. I pulled it out and grabbed one of the gray rectangles off the top and ran back downstairs. Here, I said, pressing the cell phone into Jacob's hand. It's one of our spares. You would not believe how often Emmett smashes his accidentally. It's already set up with all our numbers. I just figured it would be easier than trying to play phone tag on your landline. Wow, thanks Alice. That's a great idea. Jacob said, slipping the phone into his pocket. Thanks to my family's preparations, we were ready to leave just a few minutes after Jacob left. In addition to bags for each of us, Esme had packed a bag for Bella with spare clothes, bottled water, and snacks. Carlisle had also stowed a fully stocked medical bag in each trunk. Just because we weren't planning on revealing ourselves to her didn't mean we didn't want to be ready for every possible outcome. Esme and I were the last ones out the door. I had stopped to grab a couple of books for Bella just in case, and Esme was making notes on a piece of stationery. I glanced over her shoulder with curiosity. Dear Edward. We've been here, but we're going away for a few days. Please give us a call and don't leave again. We love you. Esme. She glanced up and met my eyes. Do I even need to do this? She whispered. She had left a similar note in Ithaca and asked me the same question. I shook my head. My visions of Edward had remained annoyingly consistent. He was still holed up in a dirty attic in Brazil, starving himself. My throat closed and I fought to keep misery from twisting my expression. If it was painful for me to see how far my brother had deteriorated, it would kill Esme if she knew. Plucking the pen from her grasp, I scrawled my own note beneath Esme's plea. Seriously. If you make Esme cry by leaving again, I'll hunt you down and remove your arms and make you carry all my shopping bags for the rest of the year. Love you. Tilda Alice. He doesn't have to read the note for it to be helpful for you to leave it, I said firmly. Esme nodded and straightened the note on the corner of the counter. Wordlessly she walked over to our wall of pictures and touched the images of first Bella's face, then Edward's. I let her have her silent goodbye, then followed her out the door. A lump rose in my throat as Carlisle pulled away from our home and I watched it disappear behind the trees. We'll be back someday, darling, Jasper murmured. I'm not sure that's such a wise idea, Carlisle said softly. I met his eyes in the rearview mirror. I believe the Quileute wolves may have begun phasing again because we were in the area, he explained. It would be kinder to the young men if we were to keep our distance from now on. He was right, of course, and my spirits lowered even more. Whether or not things with Bella went well, the Olympic Peninsula was where I felt most at home, and the thought of never returning again was depressing. Alice, can you check on Bella and see if she's on track to meet us in San Antonio? I reached into Bella's future only to find nothing. It was the same kind of nothing that was caused by the wolves, but with a very important difference. When Jacob was planning on visiting Elazar, I could see Elazar until the moment Jacob arrived and he disappeared. Now no matter where I looked, Bella was just missing. Vaguely I became aware of Jasper shouting in my ear. Alice, come back to me. What's wrong? I wrenched myself back to the present and looked up to meet Jasper's dark, frantic eyes. Jasper, Bella's gone. So you and the Cullen girl seemed a lot more friendly than I expected, Billy said, breaking the silence that had hung over us since I picked him up. Was that for Charlie's benefit? Her name's Alice, I mumbled instead of answering. They're dangerous, Jake. I know you want to find Bella, but you're in too deep here. They're not that bad, Dad. And you're right, I actually do like Alice. Too, I added, remembering the bag of cookies in the backseat. Billy sighed. I'm just worried about you, Jake.
It's no secret that you haven't taken to your new role in the pack well, and recently you've seemed, well, a little obsessed over this.
I glared at him.
If it was Mom we were looking for, would you say I was in too deep? I snapped.
My words hung over us like a guillotine. I knew that I had gone too far. I was married to Sarah for nearly as long as you've been alive, Jake. Billy's voice was stormy. It's not the same and you know it. You're right. I'm sorry. That was uncalled for. What is your part in all this, Jake? Suddenly, Billy sounded decades older. I almost wanted to check to see if his hair had gone all the way gray while we were driving home. The Cullens aren't sticking around, and they don't want to hurt Bella by coming back into her life and then leaving again. So once they find her, he'll drive down and pick her up. Then the Cullens will go after the redhead and take her down so she can't cause any more issues. Billy nodded thoughtfully. I could tell that his desire to keep me safe was warring with his loyalty to Charlie and his love for his best friend's daughter. He opened his mouth to reply but was interrupted by a tinny ringing in my pocket. I pulled out the phone and flipped it open. Hello, I asked. Out of the corner of my eye I saw Billy hold out his hand for the phone. I shook my head and shifted away. He scowled at me. Jacob, it's Bella, Alice's frantic voice blasted through the speaker. Her future disappeared. Meet us at the boundary line in 20 minutes. You're coming with us now. The line went dead and I dropped the phone in the cup holder. The beast of terror was clawing at my chest again. Obviously plans had changed for the worse if Bella couldn't wait for me to follow along behind the Cullens. My hands tightened around the steering wheel and I pushed the gas pedal closer to the floor. I guess you're going now, huh? Billy said. I nodded. Is there any way I can convince you to stay? I'm sorry, Dad, but I need to do this. He sighed heavily.
Then make sure you bring both Bella and Leah as well as yourself home safely, he said, his voice thick with emotion.
I couldn't help but give him an extra hug as I helped him out of the car. Once he was settled in his wheelchair, I shot off towards the house. With one hand, I started shoving clothes into a grocery bag and with the other I dialed Embry's number. Hello, Embry, he answered the phone around what sounded like a mouthful of food. It's time, Em. Change of plans. Bella needs me sooner, so I'm riding with Alice and the doc. I'm gonna ditch my car at the border. Can you do me a huge favor and pick it up later? I'll leave the keys in there. The line was quiet for a moment. Yeah, I can do that, but Sam was kind of right beside me when I answered the phone. Shit. How mad is he? You'll find out soon enough. I think he's already on his way over. I swore again and hung up the phone. So much for being able to use a loophole. I had learned very quickly that finding ways to get around alpha orders only worked as long as Sam didn't know I knew how to get around them. But Sam wasn't waiting for me outside as I threw my bag into the rabbit and pulled out of the driveway faster than I ever had before. As I neared the border, I began to hope that perhaps Sam wouldn't be coming after all. But my hopes were dashed as I rounded the corner to find Sam and the Cullens standing on opposite sides of the boundary line glaring at each other. Jacob, go home. The order was out of Sam's mouth before my feet even touched the ground. I gritted my teeth against the compulsion to obey. Sam, I started before he cut me off. This has gone on far enough, Jake. I want to find Charlie's girl too, but I refuse to compromise your safety or the safety of the tribe. Now go home. That's an order. I looked over his shoulder to meet Alice's horrified gaze. You're a strong person, Jake. You'll make the right choice. Alice's words from earlier floated back into my brain and I tightened my jaw. Thank you, Alice. No, I said, straightening up to meet Sam's eyes. They widened in surprise. I said, go home, Jake. The invisible force pushing me away from the boundary line doubled under Sam's fiery stare. I fought against it with every ounce of strength I had as I bit out my words. Ephraim Black's grandson was never meant to obey Levi Ulis. Suddenly the pressure pushing me back was gone and I stalked toward the Cullens van. As I pushed past Sam, he leaned over and whispered in my ear. If you choose them over your family, you will never be welcome back. I ignored him and threw my bag into the trunk. Embry arrived as I was settling into the back seat next to Alice. I mouthed "I'm sorry" to him as Carlisle pulled away. Once he and Sam disappeared around the curve, I turned around and slumped forward in my seat, all the fight suddenly draining out of me. You okay, Jake? Alice murmured, placing her tiny hand on my forearm. Sure, I said bitterly. I'm just great. I just ditched my family for a girl who may or may not love me back. No big deal. This isn't right, Carlisle sighed. We can't ask you to sacrifice your whole life to help us with this. I chuckled darkly. It's a little late for that, Doc. Besides, I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for her. From the passenger seat, Jasper chuckled. You, my friend, have it bad. As it turns out, the hardest part of a rescue mission is the travel time. I spent some of the trip napping, but mostly I just stared anxiously out the window and watched a whole lot of nothing fly past. I truly felt sorry for Jasper during this trip. After Jasper snapped at Carlisle over nothing 4 hours into the drive, Alice explained that part of Jasper's gift meant that he tended to absorb the emotions of those around him. All I knew was that my skin felt too tight, like a stretched rubber band ready to snap, and Alice wasn't exactly the picture of serenity either. I couldn't imagine how bad it must be for Jasper to carry all that. The only person who seemed to be holding it together in the slightest was Carlisle. About 6 hours into the trip, I asked him about it. I'm over 300 years old, he said after thinking about it for a moment. After living that long, driving for a day feels like a 5-minute stroll down the street. Now don't get me wrong, he added, meeting my skeptical gaze in the rearview mirror. I am anxious to find Bella and see her safely home. But I have learned over the years to keep my emotions in check. 10 hours in, we finally stopped for more than a bathroom break. Carlisle filled the car with gas, Alice headed into the rest stop to buy me food, and I was jogging restless laps around the parking lot. I couldn't handle being trapped sitting in that car for another minute. But then again, every moment we were stopped pushed a fresh new worry into my brain. It was shocking how quickly I had come to rely on Alice's frequent reassurance that Bella was alright. Now that I no longer had those, I was slowly going mad. So when did you and Bella meet? 15 hours in, and Alice had apparently had enough of the anxious quiet that filled the car. She was about 2.5, I guess. I furrowed my eyebrows, trying to remember exactly when her birthday was. Oh, did you two used to play together before she and Renee moved away from Forks? Alice asked. Kind of. I'm younger than she is though. She met me the day I was born. Actually, I'm pretty sure she and Charlie were the first people after my parents to hold me. It was one of several pictures of the swans that graced the photo albums my mom had put together before she died. Charlie was sitting in the uncomfortable hospital chair with Bella on one knee, holding me in the other arm. Bella had her tiny arms wrapped around my legs and her smile lit up the room. Neither of us remember, of course, but we have a picture of it. Oh, that's so sweet, Alice cooed. I bet Bella was really cute as a little kid. When we get through all this, I'll show you the picture. I don't know what possessed me to make that promise, but when I did, Alice's eyes lit up. Thank you. Daho loved it. So you and Bella really did grow up together. Pretty much. When she used to come back for the summers, obviously Charlie couldn't exactly take all the time off, so my mom used to take care of her while Charlie had to work. That's part of why Billy meddled so much when Edward and Bella got together, I added, feeling the sudden need to explain his actions. I mean, obviously human-vampire relationship was deeply concerning, but the fact that it was the little girl he watched grow up and the daughter of the man who was closer to him than a brother made it as personal as if Edward had been going after a member of the tribe. I can understand that, Carlisle said, joining the conversation. Even if Edward had been human, there would have been some element of no one is good enough for her, correct? That's exactly it, yeah. Did you have kids when you were a human, Doc? I'm afraid I never had the pleasure, no. That's too bad. I bet you would have been a great dad. I tell him that all the time. Alice said excitedly. Seriously, one of the best parts about being immortal is that I get him and Esme as foster parents for all eternity. I glanced at Carlisle through the rearview mirror and his face glowed with the pride and joy that I often saw on Billy's face when he bragged about Rachel, Rebecca and me to Harry or Charlie. The kind of pride that used to make me want to sink into the floor and disappear. You guys really are a family, aren't you? I blurted out without thinking. I mean, I saw all the pictures on your wall earlier, but I've never thought of your kind as having anything stronger than a coven. That's understandable, Carlisle said. I've met many other covens and I've only ever seen something I could classify as a family once. Another coven with a diet like ours living in Alaska. I have a theory that the diet we keep allows us to not only live more like humans but retain more of our humanity than those who do not restrain themselves. And the love we feel for each other is just as equal or stronger than the love human families share, Jasper added. I was curious about it a few decades ago, so I made a study of human families and compared them to the feelings we felt for each other. I can confidently say that Carlisle and Esme love us just as completely as if they had raised us from infancy. I nodded. I had no idea how to ask the next question. Part of me didn't even want to know. I let the silence fill the car again until Jasper finally spoke up. Yeah, better ask what you want to ask before you burst. I glanced at him, surprised. I can feel your curiosity and apprehension. Remember, my face flushed. How on earth had Bella gotten used to this? I wanted to ask how Bella fit into all this, I mumbled. The vampires shared a long glance. Don't answer this, I begged silently, deciding that I really didn't want to know after all. Finally, a decision seemed to be reached and Carlyle caught my eye in the mirror. Bella is our family just as much as the others, he said firmly. The mechanics of her place with us are a bit unusual because she is human, but we love her and she is important to us. Family doesn't just abandon family, I argued. Almost immediately, I regretted saying anything. Convincing the Cullens to return to Forks permanently was the last thing I wanted to do.
Yeah, that's what Esmond I have been saying since September, Alice said in a huff, casting a glare towards the front seat.
So the decision to leave wasn't unanimous, she shook her head. Not even close. Emmett didn't want to leave her either, although his reasoning was a little simpler. He thinks she's hilarious and one of Emmett's prime motivations is his own amusement. She rolled her eyes. That and he was more convinced than anyone of our ability to keep her safe, so he thought Edward was just hugely overreacting. Overreacting to what? Alice pursed her lips and shook her head. I glowered and straightened in my seat. Something didn't add up. They left to protect her, but from what obviously the threats they had exposed her to already wouldn't be helped by them leaving. Something else had happened, I was sure of it. We should tell him, Alice, Jasper said. I glanced at him in surprise. Previously it had been Alice campaigning to give me the details. Jasper seemed to be, in general, more reserved and cautious about sharing details of their life. When Alice didn't say anything, he sighed and turned around in his seat. This will be hard to hear, but please try to remember that you're in a car. It will take a lot longer to reach Bella if we have to stop and get a new one because you broke it while phasing. I nodded, preemptively clenching my hands. Would you like me to use my gift to help you stay calm? You mean you're giving me a choice? I said incredulously. I try to give my friends the choice if no one's well-being is in danger, he said, shrugging. I thought about it for a minute. Did I really want the empath messing with my emotions? Only if you need to, I said finally. He nodded. On Bella's birthday, we threw her a party. It's been so long since we've had a birthday to celebrate that Alice truly went all out. Bella, for all that she didn't actually want a party, was a really good sport about it. I don't know what Alice has told you about my past, but I had a very different upbringing than my siblings. I've only been participating in the vegetarian lifestyle for about 50 years now, but I am nearly 150 years old. The first 100 years of my existence were spent hunting humans, with the attitude that I was worth the sacrifice of their blood because I was the apex predator. You have to understand, I didn't know any better. Most vampires are raised never knowing that animal blood is an option. He stopped and waited apprehensively. I took a deep breath through my nose and let it out, letting my body relax. I didn't know exactly how to react to the information that this calm vampire who loved his family deeply and was doing his best to help rescue Bella was once a Massachusetts murderer. Finally, I looked back at him and nodded, inviting him to continue. Alice brought me out of that lifestyle and introduced me to the Cullens' way of life, but for a long time, my start meant that I struggled with controlling myself. It's mostly manageable, I just generally have to be more careful than my siblings with things like how often I go between hunting trips and how close to humans I allow myself to be. Leading up to Bella's birthday, I wasn't as careful as I should have been. It had been over a week since I had hunted, and in the excitement of the gift opening I let myself get closer to her than I otherwise would have. Misery was rolling off him in waves. When I realized he wasn't going to continue, I let the words fall out of my mouth instead. You lost control and attacked her. He nodded, shame twisting his features. It was a paper cut. Such a small thing that could have occurred at any time. But the fresh blood was too much. Emmett caught me and Edward pushed Bella out of the way to get between us, but she lost her balance and fell into a glass vase and was injured even more. Emmett and Rosalie got me out of the house and I was able to clear my head, but there was too much blood for anyone but Carlyle to stay with her. Bella obviously survived the attack, but it opened our eyes to the fact that she was in danger just by being around us. That night we decided it would be best for her if we left her life. So there you have it, he said, finishing the story. Edward had a very good reason for leaving her. Unfortunately, she doesn't seem to be any better off for it. I nodded. My hands were shaking, but I didn't feel nearly as out of control as I expected. I half wondered if that was because of Jasper's influence, but he seemed barely able to control his own emotions, much less handle mine. My father knew this would happen, I said finally. He nodded. But what Jasper's not telling you, Alice interrupted. is that ever since that day, he's been working to improve his control so that it never happens again. One near miss is already too many. She's right, Jasper said, his voice almost pleading. When I had to leave my human sister behind and watch my wife fall apart after losing her best friend, I swore it would never happen again. My thoughts were coming too fast in my brain. On one hand, he had attacked my best friend. He was the one that caused months of heartbreak and left her defenseless against Victoria. But on the other hand, I knew firsthand what could happen if a member of the pack lost control for even an instant. Emily's scars still caused both her and Sam pain every day. And Jasper was trying to make it right as much as he could. And most importantly, I knew with all my heart that Bella had already forgiven him. The time she had fallen asleep on the couch while we were watching a movie floated into my mind. Not your fault, Jasper, she had whispered. At the time I hadn't known, but she must have been talking about this. She's not mad at you, you know. Jasper looked up quickly. Bella, I clarified. She would never blame you for that. I can't pretend to understand, but heaven knows you're not the only person who's lost control and hurt someone for it. Finally, Jasper met my eyes and something passed between us. An understanding of sorts. With the pain shared, we were no longer strangers. It was Jasper who noticed first.
There are so many vampire scents around here, but I haven't actually seen one yet, he commented after rolling down the window and sniffing the air for the second time in 5 minutes.
After a few minutes of watching, I realized he was right. On the way down, Jasper described the big cities in Texas as a kind of vampire free-for-all. Because the southern covens barely had any use for humanity beyond a food source, they had a freedom of sorts that we were not privy to. Long sleeves, leather gloves, sunglasses, and a cowboy hat made a suitable cover from the sun. While the garb may be a little odd, the humans wouldn't give an oddly dressed person on the street another look. As a result, even on sunny days, it wasn't uncommon to see vampires walking out in the open. To the humans, they would be unnoticeable. But to the vampires and one werewolf in the car who knew what to look for, they would be easily spotted. Should we call the other car? I asked. Jasper was already dialing the phone. It's too quiet out there, he said to whoever answered. I can smell other vampires, but they're all laying low, which means there's bigger trouble than them floating around right now. You worry too much, Jazzy, came Ahmet's voice through the speaker. I bet they're just all having a big vampire conference across town. Jasper groaned and snapped the phone shut. He uses humor to cope with the unknown, Jasper explained to Jacob. It's incredibly annoying, but at least he usually takes me seriously enough to watch out regardless. By this point, the driving had slowed down to a crawl. It was one of the reasons we all preferred to drive out of big cities. Our reflexes were useless if there was simply no room to move our car forward. It took nearly an hour, but finally we were there. Jasper pulled into a shaded spot and cut the engine. My heart lifted as I saw Bella's horrible van parked just a few spots down from us. They're in room 23, I reminded Jacob when he sat without moving. I know that, he snapped. His face was drawn and his hands were shaking. What's wrong, Jake? I asked softly. It's just. What if she's angry I'm here? I ignored her for almost 2 weeks when she needed me. What if she's so mad she doesn't want to see me anymore? You and Bella were great friends, I said softly. I'm sure she'll be happy to see you. No, he's right. She might not be, Jasper said thoughtfully. I glared at him but he ignored me. But what does it matter? Victoria could be down that alley for all we know. It's impossible to smell her right now with all the other scents hanging around. Are you really going to let your fear of Bella being mad at you stop you from getting to her before Victoria does? No. Jake tightened his jaw and pushed open the door. The door had barely opened a crack before he slammed it shut again. That's a lot of bloodsucker, he said, rubbing his nose. Are you okay going in by yourself? Carlisle asked. Jacob opened the door again and took a deliberate sniff. I think so. The most recent scents are a few hours old. He took a deep breath and got out of the car. That was cruel, I muttered to Jasper as we watched Jacob take the stairs 2 at a time up to the second level. It was exactly what he needed, he said calmly. You coddle the humans too much, but Jacob is smart. Bella does have a bit of a temper and she may very well be angry with him at first. He needed to know that he could do it anyway more than he needed empty platitudes. I nodded absently as I kept my eyes trained on Jacob. Hey, you okay? Jasper asked softly. Better than okay, I whispered. I never thought I'd see her again. Jasper smiled and took my hand. You're planning on talking to her, aren't you? He asked softly. I nodded. I didn't ask how he knew. In front of Bella's door, Jacob had paused briefly. Taking a steadying breath, he lifted his hand and knocked on the door. 5 seconds passed. 10. There was no noise from the other side. Jacob knocked again. Something's wrong. Carlyle was no longer leisurely scanning the parking lot. Every eye was now trained on Jacob as he tried the door. It unlatched easily. The earth stood still for a moment and then everything happened at once. "Carlyle, get over here!" Jacob roared as he disappeared into the room. The three of us launched ourselves out of the car and ran up the stairs at the fastest pace a human could manage. Across the street, the rest of our family was doing the same. As we neared the door, the smell of blood grew stronger. "No," I whispered and pushed myself a little faster than I should have, making it to the door a few paces ahead of Carlyle. The dingy motel room looked like something out of a crime show. There was blood splattered on the walls and pooling on the floor. One of the beds was broken and the mirror hanging on the wall had been shattered. The smell of vampires mixed with the sense of blood, one unfamiliar rancid blood and one sweet one that I was all too familiar with. "Oh Bella," whispered Esme from the door, horror-struck. "Carlyle," Jacob moaned from where he was kneeling by the largest puddle of blood. "Please tell me that we made a mistake. Please tell me that this isn't Bella's blood and we just happened to come across a crime scene by accident. Please tell me she was never here." "I can smell her blood," Carlyle said softly. "Is she still here, Jacob?" There were no heartbeats in the apartment. We all knew what Carlyle was asking. "Did you find a body?" "She's not here." A spark of hope entered his eyes. "Maybe she got away." Rosalie was moving through the room sniffing various splashes of blood. Finally she turned around and looked at him with sad eyes. "Bella didn't actually lose too much blood. Her stinky friend is a different story. Most of the blood is hers." "Poor Leah," Jacob whispered. "But wait, that's good. That means Bella isn't dead if she didn't lose that much blood. She must have gotten away." Jasper was shaking his head. "There were 4 vampires here. There's no way she would have been able to escape alive. The only way she survived is if they decided to turn her into one of us." A heavy silence filled the room. I wanted to scream or cry, or both. I could see anything right now, but I knew this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Bella was supposed to join our family, but it was supposed to be a transition filled with love and care, with her family there to welcome her when it was over. "What are the chances she's been turned?" Jacob asked. Jasper shrugged. "It's hard to say. Edward's talent didn't work on her, which might hint at her having a gift of her own. My sire, Maria, controls these parts and she collects gifted vampires. If the vampires that were in here were part of Maria's coven, there's a good chance that they may have at least tried to turn her." "Tried." "Bella does have exceptionally sweet-smelling blood and human drinkers aren't accustomed to denying themselves," Jasper admitted. Jacob buried his face in his hands. "What about Leah?" he asked. Rosalie snorted. "Her blood stinks. Even if they tried to drink from her, they probably didn't get very far. It's actually way more likely that she made it out alive. The amount of blood she lost wouldn't necessarily mean she's dead." We stood in silence for a long time. Finally Carlyle murmured we should clean up. The rest of the family began to move mechanically around the room. Only Jacob and I stayed where we were frozen in our shared grief. "I can drive you to the airport," I said finally. Jacob's eyes flicked up to meet mine. "Airport," he repeated numbly. "So you can go home, Jake." Something inside him came back to life and he leaped to his feet, shaking uncontrollably. "It's not over," he snarled. "She could still be out there." "Jacob, Bella won't be human anymore," Jasper said bluntly. "I'm so sorry, but the friend you knew is gone. It's better if you go home and tell the pack you were too late. Being turned affects everything. Our rationality, our memories, even our personalities for a time." Esme said softly. "Please save yourself the pain of seeing that firsthand." Jacob scowled. "I can't believe you guys are giving up on her again. I guess all that stuff about family was just a bunch of talk." "You are a special kind of stupid, aren't you?" Rosalie said, moving in front of him and folding her arms. "Not helping, Rosalie," Jasper muttered. She ignored him. "We won't be giving up anything. If she's a vampire, she is welcome as part of our family and we will keep looking for her until we've offered her a place with us." "Besides," I interrupted, "it's very much not safe for you to search here. And I need my visions back if we're going to find her." Jacob perked up. "You think you'll be able to see her again?" I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. "I don't know yet. You're standing right next to me. But this part of the us isn't exactly safe for us either, and having an early warning system means we'll be able to stay and look for her for longer." Jacob sighed. "What am I supposed to tell Charlie?" "Nothing right now," Jasper said firmly. "Let us get some more info first, then we'll stage an accident and let the authorities inform him. It will look suspicious if you come back with information that no one else knows." For a moment Jacob looked like he was going to argue more, but then his shoulders dropped and he heaved a sigh. I guess there's no point in sticking around then, Jacob said dully. You promised me a ride to the airport, Alice. I'll take you, Rosalie said. That way Alice can start looking for Bella sooner. I flashed Rosalie a grateful smile. Besides, she added, flipping her hair over her shoulder. It's not like it's my car you're going to stink up. At least two people, Jasper reminded them. Maybe Esme glanced curiously at Jasper. Rosalie, I understood. Kind of. The possibility that Bella was now in the same position she had found herself in seemed to have removed the last traces of bitterness towards our youngest sister. But Esme would not have been my first choice to escort them if Jasper was concerned about running into trouble. Just a moment, Jacob. Carlisle called from down the short hall that led to the bathroom. Do you know if Leah was traveling by herself? Jacob's brow furrowed. I can't think of anyone else who she could want to travel with, he said hesitantly. What did you find? Jasper asked Carlisle. He gestured for us to join him. The blood smells like members of the pack, he explained. At first I wondered if it was a defense mechanism other members of the tribe had access to as well, but then I found this. He gestured towards the wall opposite the bathroom door. 5 deep gouges ran diagonally from just over my shoulder height down to about a foot off the ground. I was reminded of the deep marks we sometimes saw on trees close to the boundary line. They looked like they came from another member of the pack, Jake breathed. But none of the others came down. Could Leah? Jacob snorted. Of course not. She's a girl. His face suddenly paled. I need to call Dad, he said abruptly, pulling his cell phone out of his pocket. He stalked into the bathroom and shut the door behind him. It was an illusion of privacy, but we tried our best to give it to him anyway. Wait, so if there was a werewolf defending Bella, is it possible that she might have survived as a human after all? Emmett asked. One shifter wouldn't have been able to take 4 vampires by herself, Jasper said. Especially if she was young and inexperienced. That being said. He trailed off and I nearly growled at him in frustration. The rest of the family stared at him with unblinking eyes. If the vampires were just opportunistic and unfamiliar with shifters, there's a chance they may have decided that Bella wasn't a meal worth dealing with Leah for. Emmett punched the air with excitement and Esme pulled me into a hug. Don't get excited, Jasper warned. It's a pretty slim chance. Emmett snorted. Our girl has been evading Victoria for almost a month now. Daho say she's the queen of slim chances. That bit still worries me, Esme said softly. Even if Bella did make it away from here, we're back to where we started. No Bella, no Victoria, and now possibly an injured wolf interfering with Alice's visions. So does this mean I can stay after all? Jacob asked, reappearing in the hallway. I thought for a minute. Go for a drive with Esme and Rosalie to give me some space to look for Bella, I ordered. We can decide after. What did your father say? Carlisle asked Jacob. He shrugged. No one has ever heard of a woman phasing before, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. And given what we found, it's the most likely scenario. Carlisle nodded and turned to give Esme a light kiss on the lips. I waited until I heard the 3 of them get into Carlisle's car and pull away before I turned to Jasper. Why did you send Esme out with them? He raised an eyebrow. We're cleaning up the blood of her missing, perhaps dead, youngest daughter, he said bluntly. No one is enjoying this, but she was truly miserable. I thought it would be kinder for her to leave. Thank you, Jasper, Carlisle said sincerely. Jasper nodded and walked back to the front room. I followed him out and tried to look for Bella. Whatever hope I had that I could see her again was quickly dashed. I still couldn't see her, no matter how many times I pulled out and tried again. Once I checked the nollie to make sure that Jacob was truly out of range. Kate and Tanya were gleefully pelting Carmen and Eleazar with snowballs. It was such a perfect family moment that it made me a little angry. Almost immediately I was ashamed of my knee-jerk reaction. Was I such a terrible person that I would begrudge my cousins their happy family, just because it felt like mine was one more piece of bad news away from breaking irreparably? Suddenly I realized that Jasper was watching me with a slight frown on his face. I just checked in on our cousins. They seemed to be doing well. Jasper nodded and drew me into a hug. No more words were needed, and for that I was grateful. At least if you can't see Bella, that means that Leah must be still with her, he said softly. Out of habit I went to check on Esme and sighed when my vision turned up dark. It was so much easier to be around Jacob and not have my gift at all than to deal with these holes in my vision. The ringing of my phone interrupted my thoughts. Hi, Jake, I said, lifting it to my ear. Can you see her? He asked hopefully. Sorry. He growled in frustration. We caught her scent, he said. She and Leah and the 4 vampires all seemed to be traveling together. We tracked them down to an airstrip just outside of town, but I'm guessing the scent is about 12 hours old. My hopes plummeted. They're gone, I confirmed softly. We think so. There was a brief rustle and my sister's voice came through the phone. We're heading back to you. We can decide what to do next. I clicked the phone shut. Silence hung thick in the air. I should pay Maria a visit, Jasper said abruptly. I spun around to face him. Absolutely not, Jazz, I said firmly. We'll find another way. It was no secret how much Jasper hated his creator and former lover both for his cruel start as an immortal and for attempting to destroy the happiness had found the last time they'd seen each other. But Jasper was shaking his head. It has to be done. Best case scenario is that Bella's disappearance was Maria's doing and we'll be able to bargain for her release. And the worst case is that she and her faithful destroy us, I said bitterly. No matter how much she hates me, she wants my power for herself, Jasper reminded me. But remember when I said something around here has the local coven spooked, she would know what it was. If Bella's not with her, that's our next lead. Carlisle shook his head in wonder. My son, there are times I wonder if your brilliant mind for strategy isn't another gift itself. Don't worry, Alice, Emmett said, grinning wickedly. We can take them anyhow. I nodded and absently started disguising the claw marks in the wall. Thanks to the copious amounts of blood in the carpet, there was no way to disguise this as anything other than a crime scene. All we could do was remove the traces of the supernatural as much as we could. In the eye of the hurricane there is quiet. It felt like we should be moving. Tracking Bella or leaving to find Maria or anything. But instead, the whole family was lost in their own thoughts as they moved swiftly but silently around the motel room. I was so wrapped up in my own mind that when the door crashed open, I was startled into a crush. A snarl rose on my lips and then died instantly as I saw who had joined us. I straightened up in surprise. Edward. Hope you all liked the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.